17, 2023 Cottage Grove City Council meeting, which I'm calling to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so we'd please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, will the clerk please do the roll?
Councilmember Kambata?
Here.
Councilmember Dennis?
Here.
Councilmember Thiede?
Here.
Councilmember Olson?
Here.
Mayor Bailey?
Here. All right, next on our agenda this evening is open forum. This is the opportunity for anybody who wants to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda is welcome to do so. We did have a sign-up sheet out in the entryway, and we did have one person at the moment that signed up, but it's regarding something that's on tonight's agenda. So I would hold off on that particular individual. Patrick Ballmuth? Yeah. So we'll hold off on that one until we actually have our conversations about that topic. If anybody else that was in the audience that did not sign up, that wants to speak before the council, you can do so at this time. We do limit it to 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda? All right. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the open forum, and we'll move to number 5, which is adoption of the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda. Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Dennis, seconded by Councilmember Olson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is 6. We have 3 presentations this evening. The first one is recognizing Jerret Wright's years of service on the Planning Commission. I've known Jerret for a long time here, so what I'd ask maybe for council to do is have Jerret and his wife, anybody else you want to bring up with you, come up to the front here, and then we'll meet you down in the front for a little recognition. All right, we'll stick you next. All right, so just as a comment here, both of these 2 individuals here have been very active in our city in a variety of ways, whether it's taking pictures or getting involvement through Strawberry Fest commissions, which is what we're here for today. I'm going to turn it over to the liaison for the Planning Commission to talk a little bit about Jerret, but I just wanted to mention the reason we're doing this is they're moving out of Cottage Grove. We're very sad to see that happen, to be honest with you, but it's better for the family, I know, from what I've been told. So I'm going to turn it over to the council liaison, Tony Kambata, to say a few words, and then we're going to present Jerret with the plaque. There you go.
Well, Jerret, I am a little disappointed that we never got to ride motorcycles together. I had the pleasure of working with you on Planning Commission as chair, and in the years that I worked with you, you were always insightful. You always brought good questions to the table, and I truly believe you were a large part of the process that has led to, a considerable amount of economic development that we've experienced in our community. And I think you were a big part of that. And you've got big shoes for me to try and fill here in the next couple of weeks to try and fill that position. And sincerely, as somebody who had the pleasure to work with you and help mentor you, I really am going to miss you. And I think Steve's got a couple words for as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Kambata. And well, I want to talk a little bit about the character of the man, because here it was back, was it 2018 when you ran for city council? And this gentleman stepped forward because he wanted to make a difference. He liked the direction the city was going in, if I recall, and just had a very, very positive aura and spirit in everything that you did. And so getting a chance to get to know you in that fashion, you actually created a friendship with many of us here. And so, having been a long-term council liaison for the Planning Commission, it was my pleasure to, in essence, interview you and offer you a chance to join us with the rest of the council's support, which we're all very happy to do. And then when you went away for a deployment, you and I kept in touch, and when you came back, you were willing to be part of the team again, which was absolutely fantastic. So just everything you did was professional, it was dignified, it was respectful, it was caring. And I think that's something that's very important when it comes to running the people's business, to make sure we're doing the right thing on behalf of the community as a whole. So I wanted to mention, I've got a little something for you here tonight, not a plaque, but you have a special car. And this car was one, was it from your dad?
He got it for me when he got it for me when I was 16, so I actually found it again. So
Okay, and I know you did an exhaustive research to find that vehicle, and it's a 1968 Mercury Cougar. 67, okay. And it's blue, and it's called the General, right?
yes.
Okay, so I just happen to have something in my collection of weird things that I have, which is a Redline Hot Wheels 1968 of his car, almost the same color blue. I think you've got the black interior, right? But the thing is, that's a very cool piece, and I know you're going to work on your car and maybe bring it to car shows at some point in the future, and that would be something you could put on the dashboard and remember our time together here. So very, very cool. So thank you to you. No, I know, but just a huge thank you on behalf of all of us here in the community and Joey as well. It's been an amazing pleasure. So do you want to say a couple words?
Honestly, just thank you. I didn't expect to run against you guys, and then you guys became like very good friends and family, and I definitely learned a lot though too. So just thank you very much for your friendship. Hopefully I can make it up here and still visit you guys. Just thank you. Yeah. You guys got a great city here, so.
All right, so I will just mention as we're presenting this plaque to you on behalf of all the citizens of Cottage Grove, our staff and the council, thank you for your years of service and good luck where you're going, and be safe, okay? All right, let's give them a round of applause. All right, got her? Awesome. Thank you. Thanks again, okay? All right, don't be strangers now. All right. So the next presentation this evening is the Emergency Medical Services Week Proclamation. And our Director of Public Safety will kick this off, Pete Kerner, and then Councilmember Dennis is going to read the actual proclamation for us to approve. Pete, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll keep this relatively short. I didn't know I'd have so many people here to listen to me talk about emergency services this week, but I think that everyone will be impressed to hear what a great paramedic service we have, our EMS service. I'm extremely proud of our service. We started back in 1974 as the first agency that had police officer paramedics, and obviously through the years you've watched a lot of transitions. We transitioned to the fire department now, so we have fire paramedics. And regardless of what patch you have on the sleeve, I'd put our services up against any community in the state. Last year, actually, our fire department had talked about doing the Heart Safe Community. So we did kick it off last year where the council supported the letter of intent with the Minnesota Department of Health. And with that, we've really been moving quickly on this and had a lot of success. So I just wanted to go over a couple of these slides before I turn it over to Councilmember Dennis. Basically with the Heart Safe Communities, we just want to increase community and public awareness, placing the AEDs wherever people live, work, and play. And the big part for us too is educating the public on how to administer CPR. This just kind of explains what we're required to do with this. And you can kind of see that was our chamber event recently where we had our fire department there. Anyone that stopped by, they were doing hands-on CPR, doing some training. Just again, everyone is super excited about the initiative. The heartbeats where it says we need 800 heartbeats, that's just kind of a term they use for the scoring. based on population. We've kind of been using our population just in general at the 40,000, but CPR awareness events, AED locations, community heart health, a bunch of the different components of this. This was kind of our fear, is how do we get out and train as many people? Our initial goal was 2,000 people to be trained in the hands-only CPR. Since May of 2023, since we've started this last year, we've already had 1,600 people. We're doing these at every event you can imagine. We're doing them at the Night Unite. Businesses have really embraced this now, so we've been very successful. We've done 17 different events. We're required to do 14, but our fire department is never satisfied, so now they set up a goal of 25 events. So every time we hit a goal, they give us a new one, which is good. These are just a couple of the events. Recently, our Cottage Grove Lions Club hosted their meeting at the Central Fire Station, and prior to the meeting, they had the training. A couple of pictures there, that's Van Meter. They've done a couple with employees. Every time we post this on Facebook, we get another 5 businesses that want to participate. So just kind of been word of mouth. It's been really successful getting people to participate. Another big part is our AED location and mapping. Right now we have 53 AEDs identified in town. I mean, you see them at Cub, you see them at the ice arena, you see them just about everywhere, but we're encouraging more. Earlier this year, we deployed 36 AEDs in our squad cars, and that includes even our on-marks, our ATV, and that was all through a grant with the Hemsley Trust Foundation. So that was over $82,000 that we received in grant money to purchase those. But again, the 53 AEDs, we need 48, and now fire said we got to hit 75, so they keep pushing us to get more in. Overall, with the heartbeats, the different scoring, we're above that already. The only place we still need to get is more the CPR. Like I said, the goal is about 4,000. How can you help get involved in this initiative? Just spread the word. Every time Eric puts it on social media, we get 5 more businesses that ask us to participate. We love doing it for organizations. We've been doing it at the middle school. Now we expanded. We first were doing it at Altman. Now we're hitting all the 8th grade classes at Cottage Grove Middle School too. So they're out there in the community. It's just been incredible. If you know of an AED, let us know. Call John Pritchard, our deputy chief. I have the information right here. And again, get out there, learn CPR. To have one of these classes, you can connect with us. It's on our webpage. I mean, you don't have to remember John's email or anything, but if you just click on the webpage, we have the links. We're pretty easy to find. Give John a call. So with that, I should first ask if you have any questions. If not, I'll turn over to Councilmember Dennis.
Nope, any questions, Council? I think we're good.
All right.
So I guess what we'll do then, thank you, Pete. If Councilmember Dennis would read the proclamation, we'll take a motion to second to accept.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Kerner, for the great presentation and also for highlighting the fact that we have just an amazing organization here to serve people in a time of need. And it's really an honor for me. I'm wearing my old National Registry EMT pin tonight. And for many years when I was in law enforcement, I had an opportunity to contribute to some of these things through that process. So the folks in the community really are served very, very well. So it's my pleasure to designate the week of May 21 to 27, 2023 as Emergency Medical Services Week. And here is the proclamation. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of all those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical service providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Cottage Grove, County of Washington, State of Minnesota hereby proclaim this week, May 21 to 27, 2023, as Emergency Medical Services Week in the City of Cottage Grove, with the EMS strong theme, EMS Week, where emergency cares begins. This passed this 17th day with approval of the council. And Mayor, back to you.
All right, so Councilmember Dennis, do you want to make that motion?
I
since
will
you
make
read
the
it?
motion that we designate this week Emergency Medical Services Week.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Dennis, second by Councilmember Thiede. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Pete. And then the final presentation this evening is Public Works Week proclamation, and our Director of Public Works, Ryan Burfine, is going to walk us through this, and then Councilmember Olson is going to read the proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So next week is National Public Works Week. This is a great time of year where we can, really thank all those public works professionals that we have that do a lot of kind of unsung work in our community, right? They make sure you got water and sewer, you have treated drinking water, the roads are plowed, parks are maintained, and even some of those internal folks, making sure our vehicles run, ambulances, fire trucks, plow trucks, and making sure our facilities are maintained as well. So very important work that they do. We actually had a lunch today just because we traditionally do that on our annual plow repair day. So we had a nice lunch thanking them for everything they do down at Public Works. That went really well. Guys enjoyed that. Next week is the official week that we'll be proclaiming. And I think everyone knows, right, everything they do all year long is amazing work. This winter in particular, third snowiest winter of all time. I think I can say that now. It's not going to snow more, hopefully. We're done with that, but it is May. You never know, I guess. But it's just amazing things they do. That April Fool's snowstorm. Every single person, except for the two that were physically in different states, if they were on leave that day, they were in by 9 a.m. that morning. Everyone else was in earlier, right? But everyone dropped what they were doing when they were on leave and came in for that snowstorm. That's the type of dedication that we have, where they just dropped what they were doing when they had other commitments to come here and take care of our community. So I'm very thankful for that. Unless there's any questions, I think I will turn it over to Councilmember Olson.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Olson, you want to read the proclamation?
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for letting me stop down today, too, to say thank you to the hardworking men and women in Public Works and Parks who spent so much time in plow trucks this year. They really deserved a nice meal today, and you guys did a great job. So, Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity here to read this proclamation declaring National Public Works Week for May 21 through 27, 2023. National Public Works Week has a theme each year, and this year's theme is Connecting the World Through Public Works, and it reads as follows. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to the sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Cottage Grove. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and in the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures, along with facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children of Cottage Grove to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association and the Canadian Public Works Association, now therefore, the Mayor and City Council of Cottage Grove, County of Washington, State of Minnesota, do hereby designate the week of May 21 through 27th, 2023, as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with the representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contribution they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. Passed this day, Wednesday, the 17th day of May, 2023, and once we approve it, it'll be signed by Myron Bailey, Mayor. And Mayor, I'll make the motion that we declare Public Works Week.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Olson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Kambata. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ryan. All right, and thank you, Councilmembers Dennis and Olson, for doing the reading. All right, next on our agenda is number 7, which is consent. Is there anything council would like to pull on consent? Councilmember Dennis.
Mayor, I'd like to pull item G, which is the investment advisory services.
Okay, perfect. Anything else, council? All right, seeing none at this point, we'll turn it over to Councilmember Dennis regarding investment advisory services.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor. So this is a process that a few of us worked on, what we called the investment committee. Myself, Councilmember Kambata, our finance director, Brenda Malinowski, and our city administrator, Jennifer Levitt. And what we did is we went through a process where we put out bids looking for an investment management company to come and do some work here for us to help us to be able to react a little bit more quickly and more intrinsically, and also through more of a focused eye toward how we manage some of our different assets and fund balances that we have available, and so that we can, react a little bit more quickly to the market forces and do a good job of ensuring that we're handling that money to the very best degree that we can. So we went through a process. We interviewed 3 different firms, and I want to just share very quickly the nature for which we did some of these interviews. First, we sought qualifications, starting with the firm's background. We wanted to learn about these companies, who they are, what they do, who they've worked with in the past, and what their background was relative to being in this type of business. We also looked at staff qualifications, including experience levels, strength of their organizational charts, capacity and backup so that they're big enough to be able to handle us and other clients, and then also to see if they fit with Cottage Global in terms of the philosophies that we have as an organization on behalf of the community. We also looked at the investment approach, including things like security, quality, safety, communications, and completeness of proposal, so that we could have a very good idea of the philosophies of how these individual companies would handle our finances and make recommendations for us in real time. We also looked at investment philosophy and strategy that included completeness and clarity of proposal, and then understanding of Cottage Grove's unique portfolio. Additionally, we looked at communication reporting and value-added services, so things like report formats, communication techniques on monthly and quarterly basis, and other no-cost services that might be available that would lend us to find more value, if you will, within working within a given company. So the one that we decided to go with was an organization called PMA Asset Management. And so there were a number of reasons why we chose this group. We felt that they would connect more closely to the conservative nature of how we like to handle the funds and act as stewards relative to that money. They are a local organization that happens to be what was defined as kind of the right size to do the job for us. One of the primaries in the business is a gentleman named Pat Harris, and if that name is familiar to anyone, he was on the city council in St. Paul for a number of years, and also has a tremendous background being a very high-up leader in some different investment houses. And we like that because he understands what we deal with as public officials here and how to best bring all this together on behalf of our community members. And then one of the other things which was notable is that they only handle public sector organizations. So they really had that amount of background and experience to do a great job with us. So this was the one that we had picked. And what I thought I'd do is invite our Finance Director, Brenda, to come up and just take a moment to talk maybe any key information I might have missed that you want to share with the public. And then also, if you could talk a little bit about the great job that we did through a negotiation process to make sure that we got even better value for the community.
Absolutely. Mayor, members of the council, we had received a proposal from PMA. They were one of the three that we interviewed, as Councilmember Dennis had stated. And we had gone back, talked as a team, decided to go back and negotiate that rate a little bit. And so we were able to go down 1 basis point for the first 25 million. And the other value added that we found with PMA Asset Management is they also handle the 4M fund, which is through the League of Minnesota Cities. They founded that, the 4M fund. And so that will give us more synergy and streamline our cash investment. And so have further savings that way because of that short-term money being able to go over to the 4M fund quickly.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that explanation. And just to let everyone know, all of us have a copy of this here on our DS tonight. This is our AAA bond rating that we received here recently. And when you think about, handling money and being able to align things and bring more value to the table, that's something that I feel is important to share with the community so that people know that we're always focused on bringing the best possible return business-wise that we can here to the process. So what I'll do is, on behalf of myself and the rest of the team that worked on this, we'll ask the council to accept PMA as the company to work with tonight.
All right, sounds good. And thank you for sharing it with all of us and the public. So seeing there was no other items that were pulled on consent, I'll look for a motion to approve consent.
I'll motion to approve consent.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Kambata. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Olson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So if you were here for anything that was on tonight's consent agenda, all of those items have been approved. Next on our agenda is 8, which is approved disbursement. 8A is to pay the bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Motion by Councilmember Dennis. Second. Second by Councilmember Thiede. Again, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 9 is public hearings. There are none this evening. 10 is bid awards. We do have one bid award this evening, which is the Summers Landing 3rd and 4th editions final street improvements. And welcome back to the table here.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. There we go. As you mentioned, so the next item before you is the bid award for the Summers Landing 3rd and 4th edition. As you may recall, in all of our developments, we do a final street project. We remove that wedge, do some curb and sidewalk replacement, and then get that final layer of pavement completed. So the Summers Landing 3rd and 4th editions are more in the north and a little bit on the west side of the Summers Landing neighborhood. You'll see we did get good bids again. This project, we were working through that engineer's estimate about the same time as the mill and overlay project. So you'll see our engineer's estimate at $521,750 is a bit higher than what you see in our bid results. So the low bidder, OMG Midwest Incorporated, doing business as Minnesota Paving and Materials, low bid at $366,575. And like we saw with that mill and overlay project, those bituminous prices are coming down. The concrete prices were also coming down. So we were very happy to see these lower prices. So with that, I will stand for questions, and there is a resolution before you.
All right, does anybody have any questions for? All right, so you did great. Thank you. Council, looking for a motion to second on this one then.
I'll motion to approve.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Kambata.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Olson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next is 11 is our regular agenda, and we do have 3 items on our agenda tonight. The first one is 7404 Lamar Avenue Proposed Restaurant, Minor Subdivision, Rezoning Site Plan Review and Variance. And Mike Marosla is going to take us through this one, so welcome, Mike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Wayne Butt has submitted an application for a minor subdivision, rezoning, site plan review, and variance. The subject property is located at 7404 Lamar Avenue. The property is currently guided as commercial in the land use plan and is zoned B2 Retail Business District. The site is approximately 9 acres in size. A little background on the site, as you can see here, it does have a long history. In 1938, there was a large building on site that took up the whole site. And then in 1980, the site was redeveloped into a landscaping business that is pretty much the building that's currently on site. The landscaping business sold mulch and other items on site. And you can kind of see in the aerial photo in the bottom left-hand corner how the site has been adjusted, compacted because of that use over time. Different landscaping companies and commercial uses have been in and out of that building since that time. Most of the uses in there have been commercial related to landscaping or construction. The applicant did purchase the property in 2021, and since then has pulled some permit applications, added a patio as shown in the picture here in 2022. Which kind of leads us to the next point. You know, the applicant has been in constant contact with staff since he started working on the site. There has been a lot of history with the site and a lot of history with this current proposal. We have worked with the applicant through a lot of different proposals, different ideas for uses, planning applications, building permit applications. He's had meetings with numerous council members and staff throughout the process on site and at City Hall. What we did though is we had ongoing dialogue and we worked to find solutions as a staff and as a city to support a use. But we worked really hard as staff to trying to find options as we were working on a zoning code update and among many other planning applications at the time. So which brings us to the use. The applicant did submit a planning application for a catering establishment, but the catering establishment proposal, the submittal documents always reference a restaurant or a catering establishment. There are two different uses. In our zoning code, the definition for a catering establishment is an establishment that prepares food for off-site consumption. That's where you make this food at the facility, then provide it off-site. It's not meant to be served on-site. A restaurant use is where an establishment is open to the public, where food or drink is prepared and offered to the public. To be considered a restaurant, at least 50% of the seating shall be available to the public during hours of operation. During the Planning Commission meeting, one of the commissioners asked the question, why is that? The reason why we drafted it that way is to kind of separate a restaurant from an event center. The event center is an area where the intent is to rent a facility to host groups, private social gatherings, banquets, meetings, weddings, and that's why we did that. We wanted to separate those two uses. And it's also worth noting that a catering establishment is a permitted use in this district, and so is a restaurant. However, when we looked at the use that was submitted, we went with the restaurant use as the approval, as it's the most intense use, and the supporting documents support a restaurant use, which brings us to the floor plan and seating plan that the applicant did submit as part of his application. The proposed interior plan shows 90 seats, and the exterior patio plan shows 30 seats. So the applicant we reviewed it as our code against a restaurant use. Because of that, it's worth noting that all these uses, planning applications from us tonight are connected. Not one of them is standalone, they're all dependent on each other. So the first step in the process is, since we're doing a restaurant, the existing septic system on site on 7404 Lamar Avenue is not large enough to support a restaurant use. It can support about 15 persons. So the applicant has to construct a new septic system. But as we previously mentioned, the prior uses of the site have compacted the soils, so the site is not able to be used, the existing site, subject site, is not able to support a septic system. So the applicant had to look elsewhere. The applicant owns the property of 7400 Lamar to the north, and also the property south of 7430. So however, that was a unique opportunity for the applicant to be able to construct the septic system on that property to the north as it can support it. Because of that, city code requires the septic system be on the same property as the principal use. The applicant has to do a minor lot or a minor subdivision or lot combination. So the applicant's proposing to take approximately a half acre from 7400 Lamar. There is a little exception parcel on the northern part of the parcel there from 3310 Lamar Avenue. Kind of interesting, that's actually from the Ferber Farm. So there's a lot between there. So it's kind of unique in that sense. So the applicant's gonna take about a half acre, as you can see on the right side of the screen. That's what the lot would look like once they are combined. It's about 1.4 acres once it's combined. It's also worth noting that this minor subdivision is in compliance with the code. If you're gonna combine the lots, you're gonna have to rezone them, as 7400 and the little exception parcel of 7310 Lamar Avenue are currently zoned R3 single-family residential. So they need to be rezoned to B2 Retail Business District because that's what the principal use is. And that's what the applicant is proposing here, as you can see on the screen, that the middle image would be the rezoning. And then 7400 Lamar, which has the dwelling on there in the middle image, that one is in conformance with the zoning district, is not proposed to be rezoned as part of this application. Another thing worth noting here is the land use plan and the comprehensive plans we talked about a little bit ago. This proposed rezoning is consistent with it, as the properties are guided on the land use plan as commercial. So we're gonna get into the site plan review now as part of this application. The proposed building has an occupancy of 99 persons, and the applicant's proposing 99 seats. So what we did is we took the occupancy and we used that to calculate parking. Every use in the community has a parking criteria. For a restaurant, it's 1 stall per 3 seats, or in this case here, they require 33 total parking stalls. Applicant's proposing 36 on site, so there's an excess of 3 stalls. But the site is compact, as you can see back there, it's very limited because of stormwater pond, setbacks, and everything else. As also as part of this application, the applicant is proposing 3 on-street parking stalls that are public in front of the building. Those are public because they're in the public right of way. They can be used by anyone. They're not included in the parking calculations for this site. It's also worth noting that there will be 2 ADA parking stalls or handicap parking stalls located on the street as well. That is similar to the adjacent uses. They all were kind of grandfathered in with their on-street accessible parking. That brings us to a segue here to a little bit to the applicant's variance request. The applicant is requesting a variance from the minimum required parking lot setback and driveway setback of 20 feet from the residential lot line. The applicant argues that a 2.5-foot setback is required due to the following site constraints. The narrow shape of the lot, which is highlighted in the blue and dash on the screen, the well that's located in the middle of the site, and the previous uses of the site had similar setbacks to parking lots. And to the property line, excuse me there. All right, which brings us back to the outdoor seating and dining area. It's all dependent on parking this use. We had to work around parking when we reviewed it because the site is confined by the amount of parking it can support. So with this here, the applicant is proposing 30 seats on the patio. Per the city code, if you have 30 seats or less, you do not need to park the patio. That is why the applicant's only proposing 30 seats. He does not need to park it per code. Only the indoor seating has to park. And then our code also has a section that requires the patio seating area to not to exceed 30% of the total square footage of the building, or 657 square feet. And that's because the intent behind that is the patio is separate, is sequential, or it's a part of the use, but not the primary use of the building. You want the use of the building is the interior. You want to go inside and enjoy the interior space. The patio is secondary. And that's the intent behind the ordinance. So the applicant is proposing the seating plan that fits that requirement. It's also worth noting that our city code requires patio seating areas to be located within 150 feet, set back 150 feet for residential zoning districts unless sufficient screening and other impacts reducing elements are provided. The applicant is providing a privacy fence along the property line, which is highlighted in blue on the screen. He's also putting landscaping around the patio to assist in buffering and screening the patio as well from the adjacent residential use. The residential use is approximately 43.5 feet from the property line, and approximately about 65 feet from the actual house. However, there is been some thought put into putting the landscaping area to help reduce the impacts of the patio seating area from the adjacent use. The landscaping plan is on the screen. As you can see, it is a very detailed landscaping plan, which is in conformance with the landscaping ordinance. There is overstory trees spread out throughout the site. There is, as we just mentioned, there is those buffer trees highlighted in green on the screen. Those are arborvitaes. They grow tall, they grow fast, they grow thick. They will help in screening the use. And also, there's numerous perennials and other decorative plantings around the patio. It's also worth noting again, there is a 6-foot tall privacy fence that is zero maintenance along the southern property line. Neighborhood meeting and public hearing process. We did have a neighborhood meeting on March 7th. We had, the applicant did send invites to 31 property owners within 500 feet of the subject property. 4 residents were in attendance. A lot of discussion focused on future restaurant users and use of the property, site history, site and street parking. From there, a public hearing notice was sent out to the same property owners within 500 feet and also was published in the Pioneer Press. Staff did receive some written comments which were included in your packets. They were submitted prior to Planning Commission and also were provided to the Planning Commissioners. And then at the Planning Commission on April 24th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. 1 resident did participate in the public hearing, and they asked questions about on-site parking. The Planning Commission did ask questions about the comment letters, trash enclosures, seating, the proposed sector system, and stormwater. After discussion, the Planning Commission voted to approve the request. The recommendations on the screen, however, it's worth noting that all these are tied together. All applications are dependent on each other. So we have the variance request for the setback, which is tied to the site plan, which is tied to the use, which is tied to rezoning, and which is tied to the minor subdivision. So this is one package, 4 different approvals, but they're all tied together. And with that, that completes my presentation. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant is present as well.
Okay, so before we let council ask some questions, I thought I would kick it over to our city attorney. Obviously, we did see some history, which thank you for putting that up there. That was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And actually, I was, and I think Councilmember Dennis actually was also part of some of the meetings and such. But maybe you want to share a little bit more of the details.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. As you can see from the information that was provided at the dais, there's and it was presented on the screen, a very long history with this application. I don't think the applicant can say that the city was ever out of touch for long since he has owned the property. And when I started looking at the history of it for tonight's meeting, I was able to put together some documentation that I thought might be helpful for you. I didn't do it in sufficient time to present it in your packet, and it is this thick. So I would like to submit it into the record, but what I'm going to do is go through it in some pretty probably painstaking detail because I think it's really important for you to consider tonight for tonight's hearing. So I submit this into the record. And what that documentation shows is that beginning in January of 2022, city staff, as I think the planner mentioned, had met with Mr. Butt on the application or on his building and what he wanted to do with the use. He had submitted a building permit, and at the time, in January of 2022, he said he wanted to convert the former building into an event center. That was his intention. Then we fast forward to April, and it was discovered that there was some activity going on at the site. The applicant said, or the owner, Mr. Butt, said in April of 2022 that he confirmed, he wanted to confirm what uses would be allowed at the site. And he was just confirming that the use would be a restaurant, either a restaurant use as a permitted use, and he wanted to confirm that an event center was not a permitted use. And he submitted that information to at the time, the Community Development Director, Christine Costello, which she confirmed. Yes, the property is not properly appropriate for an event center. That's not allowed in a B2 zoning district, but a restaurant would be allowed. So that was confirmed as long ago as April of 2022. Later, in that same email chain, there was a stop work order, because again, there was some work going on without permits, and the city staff needed to understand what construction was being done in the building. Mr. Butt's response was that I'm just repurposing the building for a future use to be determined later. So unfortunately, staff must determine what building permits are appropriate and available and what must be done based on the use. So to say that I'm simply repurposing it or doing some interior remodeling is not sufficient for city staff. We need to know what the use is going to be in order to know what rules to apply. So staff continued to poke and find the building plans, and that there was some construction plans that were submitted so that there could be some interior remodeling. Staff did provide for building permits so that the construction could continue. On May 16th of 2022, Mr. Butt sent an email to the city staff and said, we need to get an inspection done because the building needs to be, the building is being repurposed for a wedding venue. So he is indicating that he's still leaning towards an event center at this location. But then, not long after that, on May 20th, so only 4 days later, he says, I just need a current permit application to reflect the work for the landscape building. So he's sending mixed signals to city staff. Is it a landscape building or is it an event center? And it has made it a very confusing project for the city staff to work on. And finally, on May 20th, he submitted floor plans for the landscape building, he called it. And you have plans in the packet today, and Mr. Morales will show them on the slide, that clearly show a dining room with tables in it. At the time of the building permit application, that was shown as a display room. So there's been some very, very mixed signals on this project. Then there was additional construction. There was a discovery that there was a website being advertised as lakeside events for this location. And it had people could sign up to reserve the place or to anticipate that it would be open for business later that fall. And city staff did send a cease and desist letter saying it is not properly zoned for an event center and you should not be advertising it as such. And that would be a violation of our code. In June 27th of 2022, Mr. Butt sent an email to city staff saying he's ready to submit a text amendment that would allow for an event venue. So he was anticipating again that he's going to be doing an event center at this location. And so he wanted to know if he could submit a zoning text amendment to get that use so that it would be allowed in a B2 zoning district, because he was ready to hit the ground running, as he said, in the fall. So on July 1st, his first zoning application was for a text amendment to allow for an event center as a conditional use in the B2 zoning district. Prior to that application even being able to be considered by the Planning Commission or the Council, he submitted another land use application for a conditional use permit on July 27th, asking for permission to operate a convention, banquet, or exhibition hall, which again is the same thing as an event center, but it's not called an event center. So he was trying to get an application for a use that was not allowed in the B2 zoning district because that particular use is not allowed. So the application was rejected for the conditional use permit, but the text amendment application was still live, if you will, in front of the staff was still processing that application. After Mr. Butt received the rejection letter saying that it could not be processed because it was not allowable use, Mr. Butt came into City Hall and he demanded to meet with city staff. Unfortunately, everybody was out on that particular day except for one of our junior planners. And so Connor Jakes did sit down with Mr. Butt and met with him initially alone and then eventually with the city administrator, Jennifer Levitt. And he took very good notes of that meeting. And in that meeting, although Mr. Butt was very agitated and very angry that he felt like he was not being dealt with appropriately or fairly by staff, he was able to calm the situation down and explain that, you know, this simply was an issue with the land use application and it was solely being rejected because it simply isn't allowed. It's not an application we could accept. And City Administrator Levitt did a great job of explaining all of the different options that Mr. Butt had. He could submit, we could process the zoning text amendment, that would need to get through the city council and be approved. Then he would have to apply for the appropriate septic system to comply with whatever use it was he wanted, because the existing one only could support 15 people, and clearly he wanted to do something different than a use that would only had 15 people in it. He also needed to address parking issues and see if he had sufficient parking based on the use. So she went through in detail again all of the things that would be needed for him to have a successful project at this location. On August 11th, this is where I think, Your Honor, you were mentioning, you and Councilmember Dennis actually sat down with Mr. Butt, and you talked about his plans, and he indicated that he did intend to open an event center at this location. On August 15th, he then withdrew his application for the text amendment. He indicated now he wanted to open a catering establishment instead. And I think that was one of the things that you had discussed at that August 11th meeting is, are you a restaurant, are you an event center, or are you a catering establishment? And he ultimately decided to withdraw that first application. So now, at this point, we have no pending applications in front of the Planning Commission or the Council. Then on between August 15th and 16th, again, staff discovered there was work being done on the outside of the property. There was some retaining wall work that was being done, and so staff requested that he submit the plans, tell us what it is you're doing. And so his response was, we are all confused as to why a zoning permit is required for our landscape business to conduct landscape at the property. So again, sending mixed signals that he intended to open a landscape business now at the property, when all intention or his indications had been that he was either going to do an event center or a restaurant or a catering establishment. And you may recall, then on October 19th of 2022, Mr. Butt appeared here under open forum and extended an invitation to the entire council to attend his meet and greet at his new event center that would be opening at this location. I sent a letter the next day, again, similar to the letter that had been sent to him in June when he had done a similar situation. It said, you're not zoned correctly for an event center. You have not applied. At this point, we have no pending applications for one, and so that use would be unauthorized. And if you have more than 15 people at your location, the septic system cannot support that. So your occupancy load is for 15 people. Please be aware of that. On December 27th, he submitted another zoning application, this time for a site plan review and for a catering establishment and a minor subdivision, because he knew that anything that he needed to do had to support the septic system. In January, that application, after being reviewed by staff, was rejected because it was deemed incomplete. As you probably recall from many years being on planning commissions, I'm sure most of you have sat at the table one time or another, that city staff has 15 business days to accept or reject any planning application that comes before them. So by January 11th, they did send a letter saying that it didn't have all of the supporting documentation for that application. And it listed out the additional things that were needed. In addition, it mentioned in that January 11th letter that here's the difference. You have applied for a catering business. That is what you're saying in your application. And here's what the definition of a catering business is. And it spelled it out, that it requires you to consume the food off-site. You prep it on-site, but it is consumed off-site. On January 17th, he submitted 4 applications then. Now, granted, he's not doing this in a vacuum. He's meeting with staff to find out what applications are going to be needed. That's why there's 4 applications. They worked with him to try to get this project to work. That's why there's a re-subdivision of the lots to make the septic system appropriate for a restaurant use. That's why it requires a rezoning application, because now that you're combining the lots, not all the zoning matches. So there's that. And then once you look at the property and realize this is where he wants to put the things, there's a variance application. So he had 4 applications, not just a site plan, not just a minor subdivision, but he needed a variance as well as the rezoning application. So he submitted those 4 applications. They were reviewed by city staff and again determined to be incomplete because he was missing some pretty basic elements from our code, as well as an explanation for why he needed the variances. He submitted additional information between January 17th and February 3rd, but it was again deemed incomplete because it still didn't have sufficient information. He tried to submit additional information between February 3rd and March 14th, but it was still deemed to be incomplete, and more importantly, in that letter, it was pointed out on the variance application because he did provide some additional reasons for why he needed the variance. And this is what the response was. City staff met with you at City Hall on March 22nd, 2022, where you presented your proposal. At that time, staff shared concerns about parking the site with the patio design as shown. Following the meeting, staff provided your design team with the underlying zoning district standards. And instead of amending your proposal to meet zoning standards, you chose to submit a permit application, this was for the deck, to construct a patio as presented. Due to the construction of the patio, it now interferes with the placement of a compliant driveway. In order to support a variance request, one of the required findings must include the following. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property that are not created by the landowner. Because you created the reason for the variance, staff cannot support this variance for the driveway and will recommend denial. We strongly advise you to find an alternative option for the driveway so that it can be compliant, which may require you to move the deck or redevelop the property to the south, which you also own. So the variance issue was brought up prior to the deck being constructed, prior to him doing any of that work on the property. He knew that he was creating a variance by installing the deck in that location. On March 23rd, he did submit additional documentation, and at that point, March 23rd of 2023 is when the application, all 4 applications were finally deemed complete and processed accordingly. On April 24th, there was the Planning Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission did, based on staff's recommendation, recommend to the council that they approve all 4 applications. At that public hearing, it's really important that you note this. When asked by one of the commissioners that there had been some confusion about, are you a catering business, are you a restaurant, are you an event center, what exactly is your intention? Mr. Butt replied that everyone wants a restaurant in this town. And these are from the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting. He and Angie never wanted to be restaurant owners, but that's what the folks are asking for, and we can do a restaurant. They will not be in there managing day-to-day operations, but we have a chef in mind and he's ready to go. So as soon as we get through the city council, we'll start digging ground. He told the Planning Commission at a public hearing his full intention is a restaurant. That's what all of the applications are based on, is as a restaurant. After the Planning Commission meeting, he sent an email 3 days later to city staff saying, my application included a catering establishment too, right? City staff was very clear that a catering establishment is different than a restaurant. One consumes food on site, one does not. That was the response, and the city has been very consistent in saying that response. Now, I'm sure you are well aware that within the last few days, the applicant is saying on social media and in the public that he is being forced to open a restaurant, that he does not want to open a restaurant, that he wants to be a wedding venue, which as we know is an event center, and he has been told and he knows that this is not allowed. So we have been very, very consistent in the message that an event center is not allowed, that a catering business is not allowed, that this use must be a restaurant, and that is consistent with the plans that he's submitted. His application states restaurant. The one that's in front of you states restaurant. He said everyone wants a restaurant, but that's what we can do. Looking at the history of what he's wanted to do over the last year and a half, an event center, landscape business, event center, catering establishment, now the applications are a restaurant. That's the only application you can consider. The question is, do you believe him? Staff has really tried to make this application work. They really have. As you can see from the 4 applications that are before you and the creative solutions that they've come up with to make a restaurant use work. But the analysis and the recommendations are all tied to a restaurant use. That's it. If you don't believe that he's going to open a restaurant in this place, you have no option but to deny the applications, because that's what the recommendations rely on, a restaurant use. Without a restaurant use, everything is irrelevant. And that's why I prepared the findings for denial for you tonight. The findings for denial that you find at the council dais have all of the findings that I've mentioned, as well as some of the things that Planner Morosla mentioned as well. So they all support denial. But I ask you to weigh the evidence after you've given the applicant an opportunity to speak, and you are the finders of fact. If you find that he will open a restaurant, we can support a restaurant. If you don't believe that he will, then I ask that you adopt all 4 findings and resolutions for denial.
Okay, excuse me. So, yeah, this is the time now that you're finished with that if council has any questions, and it looks like, excuse me, Councilmember Thede, you had a question.
So just as a clarification, that, in terms of eating the food on-site or off-site, there's restaurants that have takeout where the food is actually eaten off-site. So isn't that kind of almost like a little catering activity?
Your Honor, members of the council, absolutely it is. However, he has indicated not in the plans. There is no indication this is going to be a catering establishment. It has solely been pitched as a restaurant.
So could he actually have takeout in his restaurant?
Takeout, I think, was different than a catering business. A catering business is intended to prep the food for consumption off-site. And that is the business, the primary business. Takeout is a subset or a sub-use of a restaurant.
Okay. First of all, Councilmember Dennis.
Okay, well, wow. It's a lot to take in. And, I first want to say that I'm very appreciative of the investments that Wayne and his family have made here in the community. I know I've had an opportunity to speak to him on a multitude of occasions, including last night. One of the things I've always been concerned with, and I know it's not necessarily the government's job to, want to protect somebody, but when you've got a community member who's putting a lot of money on the line, it's, you want to see the right thing be done for people and not fall under risk. And these are some of the conversations that we've had. This is a tough thing. Is there any? Is there any appetite? I guess the question would be to make a motion to go with the staff original approvals. Because if there's not, is we would go through a process and we'd look for a secondary option that we could fall back on.
Well, I guess at this point, though, what we're at is we haven't even heard from the applicant yet or any witnesses. So I think we're at that point right now for council to ask questions of staff. Yeah. And then I will invite the applicant up to speak before the council, and then anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this topic. And then at that point, we have obviously some directions and things that we can, as a council, can do.
So I would just say that, it's, I guess, having been in the meetings and having had a lot of different dialogues, that the target has moved, and I've been concerned about that, and I've talked with Wayne directly on that different times, and, I don't want to see him make a mistake. I don't want to see a mistake come on behalf of the community and see something fail. My concerns as a person, as a representative of the community, and as a fellow business owner and somebody who understands, what it might take to be successful, I don't want to see something go in there that would not work. I don't want to see that loss happen for him or the community. So, I guess I would just, at this moment, just open up to the rest of the process and just see where people are at and how we want to go with it, and maybe hear again from Mr. Budd if he wants to get up and talk about it and that type of thing, and just try to come to a reasonable outcome here for everybody.
All right. Councilmember Kambata.
A couple of questions. This was previously a landscape business. Questions for the attorney. This was previously a landscape business, is that correct?
Yes. I don't know when it closed, but obviously prior to his ownership.
At any point in the timeline that Mike provided to us, I don't see an application for a building permit, rather, for a commercial kitchen. Is there a kitchen on site? Has there been has that been constructed, or is it in process?
Mr. Kamada, you're spot on, and the floor plans do not show any kind of kitchen, which has always led us to be a little suspicious. But at the same time, he's calling it a restaurant. He's put on the application it's a restaurant. It's showing a dining area. So we are treating it as a restaurant.
Okay. And the January 19th, 2022 is the first interaction that staff had regarding this project. Is that accurate?
Your Honor, members of the council, I actually don't know. I'm sure Mr. Morosa could answer that question better than I. That's the first time I have documentation.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right. Councilmember Olson.
Thank you. A lot of information, good information, and I appreciate the exhaustive explanation of the information because I was not part of some of those conversations that you mentioned, so it definitely is helpful for me to understand the nature of that dialogue. I have a couple of different things, and I'll just ask, and then you can point those in whatever direction you choose. So this might be a Mike or a Corey or somebody else. You mentioned the Planning Commission meeting, and that the comment was essentially the community, wants a restaurant. It's not something that we're familiar with, so to speak, or something that we really have a lot of experience with, but yet we want to provide something to the public, which I think is admirable. We know that Wayne and Angie have worked very hard over the years to build the business at Ferber Farm. I suspect they weren't wedding planners before that either, but you kind of feel your way around and you try to learn and you reach out to subject matter experts. And you also mentioned there was a chef who was prepared to join the group and help with the development of the restaurant, which I think is a critical element. But without a commercial kitchen, you really can't. So my question is this: if there's an approval for a restaurant use, and then the use is not what the approval actually says, okay? So, we're 2 months down the line and it's not a restaurant, it's something different. What happens then?
Your Honor, members of the council, it would depend on what the it is.
Okay.
If we discover that he's renting it out as an event center and he's having food catered in, that would be a violation of our ordinances as well as this approval. And so we would bring him in for a revocation of all of the approvals.
Okay, so if the approvals were then to be revoked, in essence, the business doesn't have the ability to move forward. Okay, good, because I don't want to see something like that happen. I would prefer that we, if we're in a place where the restaurant isn't really what is wanted or desired, or the application is consistent with what's wanted or desired, I would prefer that we just deny the application and then we start again with what do we really want to do here. Sounds like staff has spent a lot of time. There's been lots of communication. There's definitely been guidance in terms of, based upon what you want to do or not do. This is the way that we can help you as a staff. And of course, staff is always here to try to help, to support any business that we have in town that either wants to get off its feet or, might be in the midst of a change or something like that. So again, admirable. Thank you for all the hard work. I mean, shoot, this has been going on for a really long time. So here's the next question. When we think about that area, we just did a small area study. Actually, we didn't. Students from the Carlson School of Business at the University of Minnesota asked us if they could do a small area study. And they did this for their, was it their MBA that they were working on? So we had the chance to see that study, and it provided some pretty strong feedback with respect to what people that were contacted in that area wanted or didn't want. So is somebody able to encapsulate that for a minute and talk a little bit about the feedback that was part of that small area study? Because I think it's instructive. I really do.
Good evening again, council members and mayor. Yes, students from the Humphrey School of Business did a small area study. They did a neighborhood meeting where they invited residents in from the community to kind of get their feedback on what they want to see that area be long-term. As we look forward to the 2050 comprehensive plan and stuff. So they took an opportunity to do surveys and had a neighborhood meeting. And at the neighborhood meeting, a lot of people made the reference they didn't want to see it change. They like that area the way it is. And if there was to be a commercial use in that area, they want it to be at small scale. More or less like, I think one of the items was like a coffee shop, ice cream shop, something small, walkable was the thing. The biggest takeaway from the thing is they didn't want to see it change. They liked the character of the neighborhood.
Okay. And I know that when we saw the presentation, you know, there was reference to the new Boondocks Boutique out here, and people seemed to really like it, and it fit with the character of the neighborhood. I know I myself have been in that business many, many times, and, you know, they do a fantastic job out there. Was there any concern about this proposed use that came out in that small area study? Was that even discussed? I don't know if it was something that was put forward as, hey, as we're talking about this, just be advised that this planning application is in process.
Yes, council member. That conversation was had with the students. They were aware of it.
Okay.
However, through the public input, it was not really discussed with the residents and tenants of the meeting, to my knowledge, and was not presented in the findings and their report as well.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is there was a public meeting that you referenced, but very few people came. So it's hard to get data that you would consider, you know, valid based on a sample size from that few number of people. But with that small area study, the sample size was much bigger. And, you know, I thought it was, again, very instructive, really good stuff. So I guess to sort of put a bow on it, if this isn't something that people want, including the applicant, first of all, I'm a little confused why we're even talking about it, because if you didn't want it, why would you apply to do it? But second of all, I wouldn't want to approve something that nobody really wants to operate in the first place, because I mean, that's just asking for trouble. So anyway, I appreciate the feedback, a lot of good information from staff. I'm excited to, you know, hear from the applicant, and I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So unless there's any other comments by council at this point, I will ask Mr. Butt, do you want to come on up and speak on this topic? And I know where you live, but name and address.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Ryan Case. I'm Mr. Butt's lawyer. I represent Angelane. I represent Lakeside Events. I represent Ferber Farms. I represent Wayne and Angie Butt individually in a number of matters. So I'm going to make this very short. We are asking you now to approve this as a restaurant. As of right now, we want this to be a restaurant. Mr. Butt owns this land. If Mr. Butt sells this land tomorrow, that's really none of the staff's concern. I have heard a lot of these concerns and these comments, and right now, I want to be very, very blunt to this council. We are asking that you approve this as a restaurant. Do I know if Mr. Butt's going to open up a restaurant there? That is the intention as of right now. Is it going to be fiscally possible? We hope so. I've known Wayne Butt for a number of years. He's one of the most interesting and successful entrepreneurs I've ever represented, and I represent a lot of them. We are asking, and we are telling you that we intend to get shovels in the ground and put a restaurant there. Will it work? I don't know. Will we sell this tomorrow? I don't know. What we are asking this council to do is right now, which quite frankly I think you have to do, because I have not heard a legitimate reason to deny this application. The staff not believing my client, I don't think is a legitimate reason. If 2 months from now, or 6 months from now, and quite frankly, let's be blunt, to build a restaurant, I don't know how many of you have actually been involved with, I've been involved with businesses when they try to start restaurants. It's not a 2-month process. It's not a 3-month process. It takes a long time. And yes, there's infrastructure there. We're going to be back in front of this council asking for more things. If Mr. Butt doesn't have a restaurant there, or if a restaurant doesn't show up there, that council will know about it, and they can shut us down. But to have the feeling that Mr. Butt is lying to you as the reason to deny this seems to be outside arbitrary, and it seems to be arbitrary and capricious. If after 2 months, 3 months, Mr. Butt is running an event center there, which by the way, in reviewing your zoning, your updated zoning codes, I believe you can have an event center there based upon your updated zoning codes. And I may be incorrect on that, but that's a discussion for another time. But right now, we are asking for a restaurant. That's it. We don't have to get into anything else. We are accepting these 34 conditions, and even a condition that I've never seen in practicing law 20 years. I'm not sure there's any other city, and I don't know how you guys told your restaurant owners this, that they cannot rent out their own restaurants for private events. So if you wanted to rent out a restaurant for the Chamber of Commerce to come in and meet, you can't do that in Cottage Grove. I have looked at this. There's no other city in the state of Minnesota that has such a provision, but we're willing to accept it. We're saying do it. Approve this tonight. That's what we're asking you to do. Do we have some disagreements? Yes. Do we have some disagreements on how the city attorney has characterized this process? Yes. All that's water under the bridge. What we are asking you to do, very simply, is to approve this as a restaurant. And that's what we're going to begin starting tomorrow morning. If you have any specific questions for my client or myself, we'd be more than willing to answer them.
Council, any questions for? Oh, Councilmember Kambata.
Wayne, I've had the pleasure of working with you on the chamber and in numerous other capacities, as you are a successful entrepreneur, and you have been investing in this community for the better part of a decade, if I'm correct. Is that accurate?
Yes.
8, 10 years?
Yes.
I want you to be successful. I don't think there's anybody up here who says we don't want Wayne or any other business owner in Cottage Grove to be successful. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and it's not meant to paint you in a bad light, but as somebody who has helped business owners acquire property, you're asking for a variance, you're asking for a zoning code amendment. These are things that you typically have to present a practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship for. If I were the chair of the Planning Commission, like I used to be, these are the questions I would have asked you. You would identify yourself as a seasoned investor. So to me, when you purchase this property off market, I have to assume that you are not competing against any other buyers. Is that accurate? Did you have the luxury of time, I guess is the question I'm asking. When you acquired this property, did you know that you were going to intend to use it for this purpose?
Not whatsoever, no.
So you acquired this property. It was a landscaping business. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And
Well, I would say landscaping / storage, because
Okay.
the gentleman that was in there was storing,
May-
but landscaping.
maybe
Yes.
not a very productive landscaping business, but that's what it was zoned for. That's what it was being presented as, and for lack of better assessment, that's what it was. So you bought this landscaping business. It wasn't already a wedding event center. It wasn't already a restaurant. So there was no overarching expectation that that's what it was going to be. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Was your purchase agreement subject to getting these zoning approvals?
Not at all.
Why not?
The purchase, there was no intent to use it as anything. The goal was just to own the property.
Okay.
The goal was to own the properties along Lamar Avenue, along with the Ferber Farm, so we can create a barrier around the Ferber Farm to avoid noise complaints.
So the property is still useful to you if it's not an event center?
Not at this time, not after the investment.
Okay, that brings me to my next point. Prior to investing what I can only imagine is a substantial amount of money into updates to the exterior, I haven't been inside the building, but from the outside, it looks like in a lot better condition than it previously was. Had you determined what you wanted to use it for before you started spending all that money?
I'm going to pause for a quick sec. Wayne, can I, Mr. Buck, can I have you do it, speak through the mic? Yeah, if you guys would just switch. And if you need to go back, sir, you can.
Yes, so when the construction started, the intent was to eventually, like the Ferber Farm, get out an accurate, looking at the demographics of how we could sell weddings and start the wedding process. So yeah, the goal was to be an event center for weddings, long-term. And so at one time, as Corey Land pointed out, and if you look at our application, it does say catering establishment, which at the time, if you Google catering establishment, it includes restaurants, nightclubs, everything, whether the food is consumed on or off site. But between that time of stating catering establishment and restaurant, because we withdrew the application as per our attorney, you could host events. I called the restaurant owners in town, and I've asked them repeatedly, even last week, can I host an event in your facility at 100%? And the answer was yes. I said, no, you can't. The city just changed the code to 50%.
Let's stay on point here. At that point, when you determined that you wanted to use it as this type of establishment, did you first seek this zoning approval before investing those dollars?
I got to ask this question. I'm not sure exactly how relevant this is. I'm a little troubled by these questions. They seem to be. You had a planning commission.
I'm trying to understand why. Because in my mind, a practical difficulty is, I have a restaurant, and I need to expand my parking lot, so I need a variance.
Correct.
Okay. A practical difficulty is, I have a restaurant and I need more land. I'd like to rezone the neighboring parcel. Okay, none of that existed here. He's asking us to tailor make this parcel for an intended use that was never permitted here prior to him owning this property. Mm-hmm. So when you ask if we're being arbitrary and capricious.
Well, with all due respect, Councilmember, these seem to be questions. You had a planning commission that voted 7-0, and in the last week, something happened. I don't know what it is. But something happened.
This happened.
Well, again, with all due respect, that's not relevant here.
So I'm not done. I appreciate you interjecting, and if you'd like to answer for him, that's fine. But I'd like to stay on point. Would you say you've put a significant amount of money into this place? When were you planning on putting in a kitchen, in a restaurant, in a business that you were going to feed people? This just looks so backwards to me, and I'm trying to understand where the practical difficulty or the unnecessary hardship is.
My question is, why did the code change for a restaurant to 50% capacity when we can be a restaurant and host events?
Again, as he stated, that's probably a conversation for a different day. But that brings up a good point. Corey, does the B2 zoning allow for a restaurant where you can cater an event up to 50% occupancy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What is the stated occupancy of your building?
100.
I heard 90 from Mike.
No,
90 seats, or is it 100?
Councilmember, 90 seats.
90 seats.
Maximum occupancy is 99.
99. Are you comfortable booking your place out for events that are less than 50 people?
Absolutely. I'd do anything to make a buck right now.
Okay,
But he can't do that under your code.
that's because we don't allow event centers there, but we allow restaurants, and now we allow restaurants where you can book out half of your occupancy.
But you have
Were
to
you ever
remain,
intending on booking larger than 50 people for weddings there? Wayne,
Repeat the question?
were you wanted a quaint, I think in previous conversations, a quaint, small wedding venue. What qualifies as a quaint, small wedding venue? Because I'm just looking at the facts here. If a restaurant allows you to have a wedding there, but it can only be less than 50 people, and you were never intending on having more than 50 people, I don't see why you're mad.
time out, I want to make sure you can't do that, Councilmember. By your own ordinance, you have to be public. You can't have a wedding there.
That's I'm segueing into that. So if you can allow weddings to be there so long as you are a restaurant, which is allowed in B2 zoning.
Yes.
So you want to have the one part, but you don't want to do the other part. Is that accurate, or do you want to operate a restaurant, and will you put in a kitchen?
When the application was made on December 27th, my request was for a catering establishment. On March 6th, Mike Morosa asked me to modify that application and put the word restaurant in there. And so my application, my write-up reads restaurant or catering establishment. If you Google catering establishment, it's a laundry list of things. But
What does
we're being
our
told to be a
zoning code
restaurant.
say a catering establishment is?
the code
Because that would be what you would have to comply with, not what Google says.
Okay, so if we're a restaurant and now the code all of a sudden changed to 50%, where did the 50% come from? Because if I can call Junction 70 right now, and I just did a week ago, and I can rent the entire facility at 100%, I corrected him. I said, no, you can't. He said, what do you mean? I said, the code just changed on January 1 to 50%. He goes, I didn't know that. No restaurant in town knew that. The restaurants in town have never been informed of the 50% change. So if we could have done 100% like the other restaurants, we could compete for that space. But I'll live with 50% to get us running. I can always come back tomorrow and submit an application to be an event center.
Where's the
Great
kitchen?
cakes.
If it was going to be a catering facility, wouldn't you also need to prepare food there?
Yes, you can use hot plates. You don't need to invest in a full-blown kitchen with fire suppression and vents. The gentleman I spoke with at the planning commission, he wanted to do it plain Jane. We could run a sushi restaurant. Do you need cooking for sushi? No, you need refrigeration.
Where's your refrigerator?
Again, this is very, very detailed. My client has met all the standards. Your planning commission has voted 7-0. I understand there was some sort of Facebook post, an intervening act. I find this highly inappropriate. You are diving into, you're basically asking my client why he invests the way he invests.
I'm trying to establish a practical difficulty being, if this were already a restaurant, 100%, if you wanted to expand your restaurant, I don't see that being a problem. But you're asking us to do 3 things that didn't already exist there to make it so that it can be a restaurant, and
if he doesn't open it, he loses money. At the end of the day, the only person here who's going to lose money is Wayne Butt.
And I
If
don't
he
want
doesn't
Wayne
have
to
a
lose
kid,
money.
and I'm sure Wayne appreciates your concern for him, but I would think that, you know, he's gotten pretty old here. I think he can handle himself, and he wants to own a restaurant there. He is saying he can do it. What you're telling me is, you're telling me the council, because of some Facebook post, feels that they can better tell Wayne how to spend his money. You know what, if he doesn't put a kitchen in, guess what? Nobody's gonna come eat at a restaurant with no kitchen. So one of 2 things is gonna happen. He's gonna have a kitchen, or he's not gonna have a restaurant because nobody's gonna come there. I don't understand this line of questioning. It seems to be very personal in nature instead of focusing on, you have a planning commission that voted 7-0. I don't understand most of what I've heard tonight. Mr. Butt has spent lots of money in this community. You have people here that basically come to, you have gas stations, hotels that are filled up by Ferber Farms. And this has almost gotten so personal. I've never seen something like this in my 20 years of practicing law. This is amazing.
My questions are to the point, as somebody who is a business broker, the first thing you do is you get zoning approval before you start spending the money.
So maybe Mr. Butt is a bad businessman.
And that's fine.
But then let him be a bad
But
businessman.
if he wants a restaurant, let it be a restaurant. Seems to fit. We got a 7-0 vote that they want it. But Wayne, do you want a restaurant? Is that what you want to do now?
Tony, I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm looking at all my family and friends watching this video tonight. I'll do whatever it takes. Yes, let's be a restaurant.
Because if we approve a restaurant and you never see the person to eat there and you run events out of there, it's not a restaurant.
And you'll
it's
shut
a
the
private
place
event
down.
center.
And you'll shut the place down.
Which
It'll
I
be
don't,
illegal.
I don't want to go through an arbitrary process if we're just going to come full circle. I just want to be clear on that. If that's his intent, just be honest about it and let's start back at square one and let's find a way for an event center to work.
Okay,
Who
Councilmember
likes ice
Kambata.
cream?
I'm gonna,
Relax.
Councilmember Olson,
Thanks.
did you want to say something?
Appreciate it.
Well, I'd like to hear from the rest of the people.
I'm having a hard time interpreting legalese, so I'm going to call on our city attorney to do that for me. So we've heard from the attorney, you know, what am I really hearing? Let's break it down into common sense language.
Your Honor, members of the council, I think the attorney is saying you have a recommendation for approval for a restaurant. Regardless of what Mr. Butt has said on social media or in the public, he is today telling you he will operate a restaurant.
Yeah.
There might not be a kitchen in it today. Obviously, he can't operate a restaurant without one. I think perhaps the one thing I would like to clarify with Mr. Butt is when he applied for a catering establishment, that does not mean it's an establishment that allows food to be catered in to the facility. It means you prepare food at this facility, but nobody eats it on site. It is intended to be a catering kitchen where the food is taken off site to other places. That was the original application, but then once it was refined with city staff on the intent of what he really wanted to do, and he showed tables in that area that originally was shown as display area, then it was determined that it was a restaurant. That was the use that best fit. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot because I think where the communication gap exists, or at least based on what I'm hearing, where the communication gap exists is, you know, the Mr. Case, the attorney, his first statement was, hey, we're here asking you to approve a restaurant use. That's what we want. Please do that for us. I mean, that's obviously the application that's in front of us, went through the planning commission, et cetera. But there's been some additional dialogue that makes it sound like, please approve it as a restaurant use, and then we'll come back to you another time with a different use, which, that's fine. I mean, do what you want to do. You know, we'll deal with that when that happens. So, I mean, I'm not uncomfortable with, you know, going with the planning commission's recommendation if that's truly what the applicant wants, and we feel confident that that's what he's going to do, and we have provisions in place that if he doesn't do that, that we can address it. I think that's reasonable, but I'll turn it back to my council colleagues for their thoughts.
Okay, well, any other council comments at the moment, at this point? Mr. Butt, did you have anything else you want to share at this point?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. So is anybody in the audience like to speak on this topic? And if you do, you could just go up to the podium and please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. Excuse me.
My name is Patrick Balmuth. I live at 6647 Hyde Avenue South, Cottage Grove. I'm just here in support of Wayne, thus the Hawaiian shirt. You know, you don't see too much in Minnesota in the month of May unless you're going to Hawaii. You know, I've known Wayne for a little bit, and, you know, I grew up in a small town, probably smaller than old Cottage Grove, and all the old buildings are gone. The town is small. So I think, you know, we should give Wayne credit for preserving the buildings that he has so far. You know, whether he's, you know, I can't speak to the legalese of what's going on, but, you know, I haven't read too much about the ordinances and what they are, so I'm not going to speak on that. But I am just here to support Wayne and Angie, and you know, they're preserving a little bit of history. I know we're probably short on time. You don't need to hear a whole story, but I am here to support Wayne. And I think, in my opinion, as a citizen and a voter in Cottage Grove, that just slow down a little bit. Don't disapprove of his plans. From what I hear, the ordinances, what they were, what they are, there's a little bit of confusion going on there. Is it a landscape business? Is it a restaurant? Is it an event center? And as far as Wayne buying a building, you know, at the time, you know, maybe he did or didn't have an intended something in mind. That doesn't really matter, but maybe after he bought it, hey, this would be good for this, or this would be good for that. Wayne, you know, he's bent over backwards to do what the city council and the planning want. So I'd give the guy a little credit and kind of, you know, and whatever he posted online, so what? It's his First Amendment rights. He's mad, he's angry. He wants to work with the city council. He wants to do it right. You know, he's a law-abiding citizen, you know, so I just wanted to point that out. I know there's a lot going on here for me to just kind of walk into this today, but I would ask you to slow down, work together, and for a peaceful resolution of this. I would love to go to a restaurant, but but anyways, thank you for listening to me.
You got her. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I will state for the record, my name is Blake Kunstler. I live here in Cottage Grove, Minnesota, 6100 Summit Curve South, 55016. We're familiar with that zip code. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak here. I'm hearing things for the first time and then digesting the information in this audience and what's being shared. One thing I do want to clarify, and please bear with me, my hearing aids only amplify, they do not clarify. So try to do your best to speak into the microphone. It's been a little bit challenging because I've been looking at people's lips intently this evening to try and follow along as best as I can. So if I have anything that's a gap, forgive me for that. One thing I want to ask the attorney Land here. Said a catering business is a business that can make food and deliver food outside of the facility. Is that correct?
Your Honor, members of the council, that is the definition, is that
Okay.
food is prepared on site for consumption off site.
Okay. I've been to like Minnesota Wild Catering, had my wedding there. They made the food on the premises and they served it on the premises. I've been to other wedding reception type venues where the catering's there and they serve it on there. I'm not too sure why that's an extraordinary or maybe a different ordinance here in the city of Cottage Grove. I'm just noticing that. I know elsewhere, I could be wrong, I could be remiss, so, but that's been my experience. And then secondly, I'm noticing, just want to call out, if there are disparate treatments from one restaurant to another in Cottage Grove, I would hope that there wouldn't be disparate treatment in any of the ordinances there. I do get the fact that this particular property might need a septic system. There might be different things for that regard. But as far as treating all the restaurants as equal, please consider that. That ends my conversation here with the city. Thank you very much for giving me this time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Forgive me, I'm a little nervous here.
Okay, just name and address for the record is all.
My name is Mary Marty. I live at 7889 Lamar Avenue South. I was not informed. I read someplace or heard during this meeting that they sent out only to people within 500 feet. That doesn't conclude very many since there's a business next door. They own the house next door. In back is a lake, and in front they might have had 3 people. I don't know how many they informed, but they didn't communicate to the city of Old Cottage Grove. Secondly, we do not like the buses and the drunks that are imported from out of town into Old Cottage Grove. I heard Wayne Butt himself say that there have only been 2 residential people from Cottage Grove get married at that church or at that farm. That means that all those people are imported from other towns. And that's fine, but it's not your neighborhood. It's mine. If I had gone about trying to get this business set up and I had made all these mistakes and I had made all these bumbles and all these excuses, you would not have given me any variance. You would not have given me anything. Now, that is speculative. I also want to speculate that it sounds like Steve Dennis is in Wayne Butt's pocket. It's just what it sounds like from being here and listening to everything that's going. He had nothing for praise. I understand he's a businessman. I understand he wants to make money. Let him do it. But let him go through the proper procedures. And I don't think that he has gone through the proper procedures. And when I saw that you guys were ready to approve everything that he's asking for, it was like, how could you do that? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to speak, Councilmember Dennis?
I would. Don't confuse compassion with anything other than care for another individual. Don't confuse that. And don't make an accusation you can't back up. That's what I have to say. It's not true.
I know. Councilmember Olson, real quick.
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to the comment, you know, I'm an old timer. So I was on the council when Wayne and Angie came forward with the Ferber Farm Plan. And what I can speak to is through the course of that planning process, we had several different speed bumps where we had to talk through making, adjustments, variances. One very specific concession I recall was the difference between a gravel parking lot and a paved parking lot and the expense of that. And, could we find our way to enable the business to use a gravel parking lot? And the reason I point that out is, we work very hard as a council and a staff, and primarily staff. By the time it gets to us, the staff has really done the heavy lifting. We work very hard with all of our local business owners. And when I say local business owners, what I mean to say is any business that's in town is a local business. Target's a local business. We've worked with them several times on adjustments in their parking lot due to a need for different landscaping or stormwater, because those rules change. And so as rules change, we have to try to change with them. We are very, very thoughtful about any sort of arbitrary or capricious behavior. And so if there's anybody that is watching this at home or listening to the sound of my voice that has an impression that somehow the city council puts their finger on the scale, whether a city council member is in somebody's pocket or not. I mean, we've had that happen to us before. We've been accused of being a 3M's pocket when the incinerator was approved, despite the fact that we fought it as hard as we could and we just lost the fight. People come into these kinds of conversations towards the tail end, and we have the benefit of having been there from the beginning. And so that gives us a lot of knowledge about the process, step by step. How did we do things? So again, very important for people to remember and to understand that as a council, we are dispassionate. We look at things from both sides. We are bound by the law to do that, and we are bound to act within the confines of the law, which is why we ask so many questions of our city attorney, who's also the city attorney in several other municipalities and does an excellent job. And the last thing I'll say is none of us, and I mean this sincerely, none of us, it's important to note that, none of us have our votes for sale, ever. So whether it's one way or the other, it's all based on findings of fact and our best judgment and experience and the input that we get from staff, residents, et cetera. So, I don't like hearing somebody is in somebody's pocket or that there's some sort of a difference in the way restaurants are being treated in the city, because none of that's true. None of it. Thank you.
Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree almost entirely with what Councilmember Olson had to say. One of the differences, in my opinion, having been here for a long, long time, and again, having been a fellow who invested in the community and went through it, and initially I had some challenges with signs and other things too that we had to try to work through. It wasn't easy. One of the key differences when people talk about the city and try to lump everything in, there's different components of the city. So you have staff members. Staff members operate in a very narrow band. They stay between the lines and they follow the ordinances and the other process that we have. We have commission members that are volunteers that come in from the community, that live here, pay taxes here, and these folks have the ability to take findings of fact or recommendations or guidance from the city staff, and they get to look at things in a certain fashion and apply their decision-making process into crafting what their final answer would be as a recommendation to the city council. Then you have the council itself. And so we are legal, hired and elected officials that are representatives of the community. So if we look at things through a lens of saying that we're in the people business, and we are, people have heard me say it over and over here through the years, we try very much to sell happiness wherever possible, to do the right thing on behalf of the greatest good and the largest number of people. Again, we have a little bit more latitude, and we have an opportunity. If we want to exercise some care, compassion, empathy, or respect to anyone in the community here that we serve and represent, we have the authority to do that. And that's what we've done a little bit here tonight. So this is not about, putting fingers on scales, trying to manipulate outcomes, being in pockets, those types of things. It has nothing to do with that. This is about trying to do the right thing for the greater good. Thank you.
Okay. Did anybody else? Yes, there's a gentleman out there.
Hi, my name's Edgar Marty. I live on Lamar Avenue. I think this is pretty cut and clear. Whether it's a catering place, a restaurant, whatever. If you're gonna have a venue for that, then you need a kitchen. You're submitting plans and everything for something that doesn't even have a kitchen drawn in it. I don't know how it could even move forward. I mean, that's like trying to submit plans for a body shop and not having a paint booth. I mean, how can you sit there and say it's gonna be a body shop when you don't have the infrastructure built inside for that body shop? They're saying it's a kitchen, catering place, whatever, they'll come back later, argue it. how can you sit there and say it's a kitchen or a restaurant or anything if it doesn't have the infrastructure planned in the own plans for its own building? That really blows my mind, and that's all I have to say on the subject.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak at this point? Okay. Seeing none.
Mayor, how do you want to handle the various elements of this? I know they're all interconnected, so do you want separate votes on each one? Do you want, go ahead.
Your Honor, if I could,
Yes.
I would recommend that you consider the variance application first, because that then will dictate how you vote on the rest of the applications. The variance application, in my opinion, is the hardest because you have to overcome the fact that it's a self-created issue. He did have some reasons that he stated in his application originally, that he indicated there were some obstacles in the narrow site. However, he was warned ahead of time prior to the construction of the deck that he would be creating the need for the variance. So if you could consider the variance application first, decide how you want to address that and whether you want to approve it or deny it, then that will determine how you vote on the rest of the resolutions.
Just
Councilmember Thiede first.
point of clarification, I think Mike said that these were all interrelated. Does that suggest that if any one of them does not pass, then none of them pass?
That is correct, because the initial one is based on the restaurant use. All of them are based on, the recommendation for approval is based on a restaurant use. If he's not going to use it as a restaurant, then you should not approve them. If the variance does not pass, then the remaining ones also cannot pass, because the site plan is dependent upon the variance, which is dependent upon the use, and the rezoning and the subdivision are all tied together.
So we're talking about 2023-070. Is the first one, is that what you're?
069.
6-9 is the top one.
Top one. Parking lot setback.
So,
That's not the variance for the restaurant, that's a variance for parking lot.
Your Honor, members of the commission, or members of the council, it is, the variance application is for a restaurant use. The variance application specifically is for a setback for the driveway and the parking lot, but it is all related to the restaurant use.
yes, Councilmember Kambata.
2 questions for our city attorney. Remind me of the 34 conditions. Is one of them that they be open to the public?
Your Honor, members of the council, that actually is our definition in our new city code, as you may recall, which went into effect on January 1st. So I'm not surprised that all the restaurants haven't been informed yet of that requirement. But that is a requirement of the code. Whether it's in there as one of the conditions or not, it's irrelevant because they'd have to comply with the code anyway.
And then my next question is, in being a restaurant, is there anything in our code that requires a kitchen?
Your Honor, members of the council, I guess it's sort of a common sense. In order to have a restaurant, you have to have a kitchen and be licensed by the Department of Health, or the county at least, the county's health department. So in order to be deemed a restaurant, you have to have an on-site kitchen.
And follow-up question to that is, in order to get the code or certificate of occupancy to operate the restaurant, they would need the county health certification, correct?
Yes.
So without that, they can't operate a restaurant.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. That's what I've got.
So what was interesting, hearing from, is it Mr. Case? Is that you, Mr. Case? You were making the comment earlier about, things that are out on social media are irrelevant. I beg to differ. When an applicant, before he or she comes here before the city council for a permit and variances to open a restaurant, asks people to come here to voice their support for this, for him, knowing that he doesn't want a restaurant because that's what he says in the multiple postings, including at the Chamber of Commerce, I'm concerned. And as they know, because I see Angie back there, I have been to your establishments multiple times. I've been to your home and saw your grandson, and pet the dogs and did all the stuff there. And we were trying to work with our staff to make this work, make this property work. I understand you didn't like the line of questioning that was coming from Councilmember Kambata, but I would just tell you from my personal standpoint, and I'm not somebody that I work in business, but I would have checked the zoning before I bought something to make sure I knew what was going to go in there. With all due respect, and with Mr. Butt, the fact of the matter is he did just say is up here, and it's now on the record, that, you know, today he wants a restaurant, maybe tomorrow he'll come and apply for another permit to do an event center. That is not what we want out there. That's not what's called for on that spot. It never was, nor was it a restaurant, but we were trying to work with him to make that happen. And what bothers me, to your comments, and what upset me the most about what I saw in the postings, is Councilmember Dennis and I actually sat with Mr. Butt and some of the representatives that he was working with to make this happen. And he said to us directly, this is what I want, this is what I want, this will be good, okay, that's fine. And we worked with our staff through all of these different variances and issues to come to a point where now he's saying one thing to get people here on social media and then says another thing when he's standing up here. So I have a concern with trust, okay? I'm just telling you right off the bat. So, you know, council can make a determination on what they want to do at this point, but one of the things I value is people being trustworthy. I do whatever I can. I'm an advocate for this community in every way, shape, or form. I was an advocate for when they wanted to open the Ferber farms out there. I was an advocate for them. Matter of fact, in a couple days here, we're going to try to attract more businesses to our community for what our citizens are asking for. But on this particular case, I can't vote for this. I cannot move forward with a restaurant use with the understanding of what he has publicly said out in the public and the basis of findings of fact from our staff that has been provided to us today. So depending on whatever the decision that the council makes, in this particular case, I will be voting no. Councilmember Dennis first.
Okay, and I would like to direct this question to our attorney. Remembering the time that I spent as a liaison to the Planning Commission, when a variance is granted, that variance stays with the property into the future in perpetuity, correct?
All of these land use applications stay with the property.
Okay, so just for us to understand, when a variance has been adopted to a piece of property, what would happen if you came back later on and wanted to change that variance? A variance to a variance?
It would need to be amended. Any of these land use applications, once approved, they are basically written in stone. They're recorded against the property, and they remain there in the current conditions, all of the words, unless the applicant comes back for an amendment or the council brings it forward for revocation.
And then they would have to show, again, a hardship or a condition requiring that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Thede.
So, I guess I've known Wayne and Angie for a while. We've done a lot of discussion in the clouds as to what would be neat in Old Cottage Grove and some kind of an old downtown, you know, shops and buildings and things like that. You know, I think while we don't agree on everything, that you know, I do kind of admire his passion and so forth for getting businesses going and having kind of the guts to do it. might not have as much patience as he needs in some cases. But I guess, and referring back to the study that the University of Minnesota kids did, one of the big things that when they had made their chart about comments was people wanted a coffee shop or something like that, which was kind of like the restaurant and so forth. So I guess based on what I've seen, and I know that in any type of business, it's a struggle sometimes to figure out, what are people going to want. I guess I support a restaurant being there, and I guess I would support a variance to allow a restaurant there. But and I have faith in Wayne that he wouldn't, he'd do everything he could to make that happen. So.
Okay. Councilmember Kambata.
I don't see a hardship to justify the variance. I think it's self-inflicted, so I'm a no.
Okay. So what, Councilmember Dennis or Councilmember Olson, you want to have any other comment? Okay. So at this particular point, there's two, is it 2023-069? Is that the one that's first, correct? I just want to be very clear.
Yes, the variance.
Okay. So at this point, from a council's perspective, I'd be looking for a motion to approve or to deny Resolution 2023-069.
Well, I'll go ahead and move to adopt Resolution 2023-069, approving the variance to construct a parking lot setback 2.5 feet from the side property line when 20 feet is required when located adjacent to a residentially zoned property.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Thiede. Do I have a second? Okay, no second, so that motion fails. So we would need another motion of something different, I guess, at this point. Councilmember Kambata.
Corey, would I have to go in individual order on these?
Once you adopt the variance, then no. Then the order is irrelevant.
So what she's saying is if you were recommending denial, then none of the other ones matter on the first one.
I move to deny Resolution 2023-069, which was asking to approve the variance to construct a parking lot setback of 2.5 feet from the side property line when 20 feet is required when located adjacent to a residentially zoned property.
All right,
again, my motion is for denial.
Okay, so we have a motion for denial by Councilmember Kambata. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, second by Councilmember Olson. Any other discussions at this point? Yeah, Councilmember Olson?
Right. So I would just encourage city staff to continue working with the applicant on whatever the actual desired use is going to be, so that we can hopefully, find some resolution to that and some compromise that will work for all involved.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of the denial signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
Aye. Dave, what was yours?
Did you vote aye for it?
Nay.
Nay, that's what I thought. Okay, so 4-1. Okay. All right. So the other recommendations do not need to be,
They do, Your Honor, but they could all be considered together, just to
Okay.
adopt the remaining resolutions for denial.
so who wants to take that? Councilmember Kamada?
In light of condition number one, or item number one being denied, I make a motion to deny items 2, 3, and 4.
Is that good for coding? Okay, so we have a motion to deny resolutions 2023-068, ordinance 1065, and resolution 2023-070. Do we have a motion? A second, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Second, Councilmember Olson. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Okay? All right. Are you guys okay to keep going? Yeah. Okay.
You want to take a 5-minute? Or not? Or you want to keep going?
Let's keep going.
Okay, let's just keep going. All right. So the next item on our agenda this evening is also under the same category, which is B, Northmark Architecture, which is comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, and site plan review for a proposed apartment complex. And Emily is going to take us through this, so thank you, Emily.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As indicated, the next application is before you this evening. There's actually 3 submitted by Norhart Architects for a 299-unit multifamily building on a parcel that we've spoke about internally as we called the Civic 40, which is located just south of 100th Street, adjacent to Hadley Avenue as well. This particular parcel was a part of a preliminary plat approved just about a year ago in 2022, May of 2022. 2 parts to this preliminary plat. The way I kind of like to look at it was this 40-acre parcel, the Civic 40, which the preliminary plat created 4 developable parcels. Further to the south, as you can see, there was a lower density proposed project as well with this preliminary plat. However, given the market conditions, the applicant at the time did not continue to move forward with the final plat, so the project kind of stalled at that point. However, Norhart Architecture actually submitted a final plat, which was approved back in December of 2022. Now, this final plat was just for this Civic 40 parcel, as you can see on the screen in that upper corner, for those 4 future developable parcels. One of the applications as a part of this request is a comprehensive plan amendment. As you can see, this particular parcel is currently guided as industrial. However, as we've seen industrial development continue in this particular area, we've come to understand that this uniquely shaped parcel isn't necessarily conducive to support an industrial development. Therefore, as Norhart has proposed their project, we recognize that the request to amend or re-guide to a high density would be appropriate. So that request is before you, as well as a rezoning from industrial to R6 high density residential. As I had indicated, a 299 unit market rate apartment is the proposed item before you this evening. It is 5 stories, so of course as a site plan review we take a look at a lot of different items as a part of the site plan. Particularly this is proposed as access off of Hadley Avenue. You'll see 2 access points for an appropriate flow through the site. Pedestrian accesses are also proposed to Hadley Avenue, as well as to the future constructed trails along 100th Street. Setbacks are proposed to meet the city's minimum standards. It's important to point out a 30-foot setback from adjacent residential properties is required. However, this applicant is in fact proposing a 180-foot setback from the building to adjacent residential properties to, of course, continue to provide a buffer to any of those existing residential neighborhoods, specifically to the north. The height of the proposed project, again, it is a 5-story project. They are proposing a 55 feet in height, which is permitted within the district. And the parking they're proposing on site is surface as well as underground parking, again, providing 1.6 parking spaces per unit, which aligns with our city's minimum standards. If you're familiar with this area, you'll know that there are actually no streets that look like this out there currently on this Civic 40 parcel. So it's important to reference the Southwest Arterial study that the county did complete just about a year ago in 2022, which evaluated the realignment of 100th Street and providing that connectivity between Jamaica Avenue specifically down to Great Cloud Island, and then Hadley Avenue. This particular configuration, of course, has also been in our comprehensive plan, long-range plans for many years. The South District Street and Utility Project, which is not an unfamiliar term to the council, is the project to construct the utilities and the streets within this particular area. The utilities will be installed as a part of a project in 2023, and the streets will be planned to be installed in 2024. Staff is working closely with the applicant to be sure that they're provided an access and temporary access as they work to start construction in the fall of this year. The landscape proposed on the site does in fact meet the city's minimum standards. It's important to note that they did focus their landscaping buffers adjacent to the public rights-of-way. They certainly can't buffer the entire building, however, they want to ensure that that is complementing the building and the site as a whole. In addition, I wanted to point out they are planning to preserve an additional open space kind of on the northern portion of this site for their residents, and of course adjacent parcels as well to use as a part of their proposed project. The architecture the applicant is proposing, of course, we do require Class 1 materials, and I will say this applicant did work hard to ensure that they were proposing and providing those materials on this particular project. Brick, stone, and glass, as you can see in these renderings that they've provided, a large portion of this proposed project is glazing or glass. Creating or proposing actually greater than 65% on each of the elevations of this proposed building. And finally, I wanted to make note the applicant did invite and hold their neighborhood meeting on April 11th. So it's been some time. However, I thought it was important to indicate the two concerns that staff did hear as we listened as a part of the meeting. One, of course, was the traffic impacts that we know that we evaluate with every project that comes in this particular area, understandably. So we, of course, referenced the AUAR that evaluated the traffic of potential development in the area, ensuring that we're providing those improvements as needed. And secondly, we heard concerns about the impacts of these additional units to the school district. And so I thought this was an important time to reiterate that staff works very closely with the school district on a regular basis. We communicate typically on a monthly basis, providing updates on any potential development or even thoughts of development that we might have in the community in an effort to help the school district as they continue their long-range planning efforts. And then I also did reach out to the school district, and they provided me, there was more information, but I summarized to ensure that folks understand that the school district is making a huge effort currently to invite the community to provide their input and ideas as they continue to plan in their long-range planning efforts. So with that, I will leave the recommendation before you this evening. Staff is available. Norhart, the applicant, is also available.
Okay, thank you. First, we do have some questions, I think. Councilmember Thiede, please.
So I think it was the parcel to the north of there, along 100th, that we had, or it's no longer, or it's on hold, another apartment complex just to the north across 100th there, is that? So it would be in that parcel that just to the kind of the north and that triangular parcel, is that where that other one was?
Mayor and council, we have been in communications with a developer who's interested in that particular parcel.
I'm sorry.
But, yeah,
Can I pop in, though, because I'm curious about that. Is that MDF?
Mayor, members of the council, the red X that's shown on the screen on the parcel that I believe that is in question is currently under option by MWF Properties.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Is that what you were looking for, too?
Yeah, and I the picture that they did, obviously, from the house on the Hunter Street, there'd be that apartment in between if it ever comes to pass, right? Yeah,
okay. Councilmember Olson?
Thanks for the information, Emily. Very good. My concerns revolve around two things that you addressed in your presentation. Obviously, traffic. That seems to be a concern of any neighbor when there's new construction that takes place in their neighborhood. But moreover, I'm concerned about, are we being proactive in terms of anticipating any negative outcomes from this facility relative to, as you mentioned, the school district, as you mentioned, any sort of roadway infrastructure that might need to change. And I know it's a little bit challenging for planning staff or staff in general to do that because it seems like consistently what happens is you build something and then you wait until a bad thing happens and then you address said bad thing. And I've told this story a million times, but when I was a commissioner, on the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Commission, we knew that the construction of new homes in Timber Ridge, which, you know, definitely added a lot of cars to the road, would result in some sort of issue at the intersection of the new then Hardwood Avenue and 70th Street. And we talked it through and we all agreed, and then we had to wait until there was a motorcycle accident or two before we could actually get stoplights put in down there. So I would like to know what sort of proactive dialogue we're having with, you know, city engineering, the developer, school district, et cetera, about ensuring that if and when this project comes online, that we've worked proactively versus reactively to address some of these concerns, because the neighbors will let us know that something is bad or something is wrong if we don't try to get out in front of it and correct it, you know, ahead of time.
Actually, I believe our administrator would like to take that one.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, this is a great point because
Thank you.
clearly,
I thought so too.
Clearly, partnerships and forward thinking is something that obviously we have learned some of our lessons in the past, and you brought up some of those examples. And I think what is unique here is we have learned from those. So when we looked at our comprehensive plan and we looked at actually how we were going to lay out the streets, this was all forward planned, right? So when we looked at the AUAR, we looked at all the different uses and the intensity of those uses and what the traffic generations would be. We were so forward in this that we actually had a full plan set out to build the streets, but then obviously we saw a lot of development kind of take a little bit of a back seat and not progressing as far. So we modified the bid to actually just construct some of the utilities and not all the roadways and not what I'll call the X. But we are positioned now to, if this project moves forward, to rebid that project and be under construction next year. And I know engineering can come up and talk about, you know, the improvements that are being made to 100th Street as relates to North Point. The mayor can probably talk about his meeting today at TAB at Met Council as we're looking to secure funds. We know that we have the design efforts underway substantially, working with 3M as a willing landowner for right-of-way acquisition. I would say we are very forward-thinking in this, and that this incremental project will not have a negative impact on the traffic, and we are prepared to build the ultimate solution.
And will you speak to the school district as well? Tell me a little bit about what that dialogue sounds like.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, I reported to you on Friday that we did attend the luncheon with the school district because obviously we work very closely. Every 2 weeks, we actually transfer data to them, telling them how many lots, you know, have been platted, how many building permits have been issued, if it's multifamily, high density, single family. So they know exactly which school is receiving those potential students, and they have ratios that they apply to that. They had already, before this school year, already adjusted the boundary to where these students would go, knowing the challenges that they had at the Pine Hill Elementary School. They are still continuing to refine a future referendum question that they anticipate being on the ballot in November. Our project did not cause that impetus for that, but we work together in partnership with them so that we would develop a solution that works for everyone, because we know that great schools actually help provide, you know, our opportunities for housing and businesses. People want to be where great schools are, and so their success is our success.
Fantastic, thanks. It sounds like the staff has really gotten out in front of all of those issues, and I appreciate the update. That makes me feel much more comfortable.
Just as I'll piggyback on what our administrator just shared for you, Councilmember Olson, regarding the school districts, if I recall, when we actually had a meeting with them a couple weeks ago, this particular area and areas to the south, so any other possible developments that's in there, obviously in the future, who knows what happens with Pine Hill, but Pine Hill, I believe, is at capacity right now. But their intent is everything on this side of the road is going to go to Pullman in St. Paul Park, and the reason is because Pullman is being underutilized with students, so they have plenty of room there, and so their intent is to bus over to that particular school. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this? Does the applicant want to come up and speak? Sure.
My name is Mary Beth Wise, and I'm at 1081 4th Street Southwest in Forest Lake, Minnesota. I will keep this brief. Thank you for having us here. It's nice to see you again. I won't go into who Norhart is. We had a workshop with you, very productive, and Emily did a great job of explaining the project we're doing. I do just want to touch on a couple items. When we design our buildings and our apartments, the resident is on top of mind for us. That's our main goal, is to provide, we go the extra mile, and we try to provide lifestyle living, luxury amenities, convenience, and community. And touching upon community, and that extends from just our residents to the community around us. As Emily pointed out, we made the effort to really provide a large buffer so they're not impacted with a view right up on the edge of the property. We also are already working with the community. A gentleman in the audience, we are sponsoring a hole at one of the local golf tournaments. So it's nice to just already get involved, and we are happy to do that. We look forward to doing more. And so I thank you for having us here, and we're excited to be building in part of the community coming up.
Fantastic. I guess what I'll ask for maybe the public is, should the approval go through tonight, what's your time frame of? I always get asked. I don't know about the rest of the council.
Absolutely. So we're looking to put shovels in the ground November of this year, and it'll be a 2-year project. So we'll finish November of 25.
All right. Fantastic. Council, any questions for her? Yeah, Councilmember Thady.
Actually, I just want to point something out, and with the other apartment and the other aspect of traffic, and I know we're taking care of some of the stuff in front of North Point, and what's the latest on the county and getting to 61 on 100th?
Okay. Well, I don't know if that's going to be her, but I can.
No, it's not, but.
I can maybe talk to that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What our administrator was speaking to is, for the public who may not know, I'm other than mayor and some of the other hats I wear, I'm also on the Transportation Advisory Board for Metropolitan Council. And in our meeting earlier today, we had submitted the 100th Street project for financial consideration from the transportation and TAC. There's a variety of acronyms, believe me, there's a lot. And for, I believe, just over $7 million is the target goal from them. And we are now on that point where there's 4 projects that are going to be added, and I'm speaking on behalf of our community and Washington County for this project next month. And if that comes through, then obviously the goal would be that we have another $7 million, and we obviously have some money coming federally, and then we're also working at a couple other grants to continue the funding process. I do know, I will say that obviously that road is a county road, and obviously we're working through that, and what we're talking about for the public is pretty much everything, I'll say, east of Jamaica, and the goal is that we will have a new access, an easy access road that will go all the way out to Highway 61 and the bridge that's out there. It also, our intent is in the future is to go over the railroad tracks so there won't be an at-grade crossing. And the idea there is obviously truck traffic, residential traffic, and that can get another way out of our community from that, I'll say, the south end of Cottage Grove. And so that's just to share with you, that's kind of where it's at right now.
The years, because I mean, if this is 2 years and North Point starts opening up, we're going to hit a situation like Justin was just talking about, that, all that traffic's going to bunch up, try to get out, in Jamaica or go down through 95th or through, already busy Hadley Road down there to, so I think we really need to be focused on, whether we have to delay some things in terms of the number of people that go in there or whatever. Otherwise, we're going to have a mess, right?
The only thing I guess I'll ask our administrator for, in the project that we submitted in Met Council, whether it's you or for our Ryan Burfine, what year were we talking about for them? I know what they're asking for now. It would be, the funding for this project would be in next year's 24-25. So just to answer that question for you, is that what we submitted for?
That's correct, Mayor,
Okay.
members of the council. 2026 was our goal for construction year, but I do want to note, like with North Point, that worked under our current plans and roadway construction. And just really quick for traffic, it goes in two directions. So actually, like an apartment does not compete in any way with an industrial user, right? Because they're coming into town, and an apartment is leaving town or staying in town. So actually, it's those same uses over and over again that really drive traffic issues in the peak time. So actually, these different uses are actually a good thing in terms of traffic flow.
But one's coming when one's going, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you for answering that. All right. Council, any other questions? I guess I should ask, was there anybody in the audience who would like to speak? Yes.
Hi there, Zach Hartfield, 8068 Hornell Avenue South. So the school district tomorrow is meeting for the attendance boundaries for elementary and junior high, middle school. That'll be Armstrong, where Norhart is, and it'll be Cottage Grove Middle School. So that's the map that they have drawn up for tomorrow's meeting. So just updated information.
No, thank you for that. I do know when we just spoke a couple weeks ago, but I also know too what we heard is Armstrong and Hillside are underutilized also.
Right, so they're spreading that boundary a lot.
Yeah,
So that
makes sense.
That's
That
what
makes sense.
tomorrow's.
Thank you for the clarification then, thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, council, we have 3 motions before you, unless you have any questions or comments, then we can go from there.
I'll make the first motion, Mayor. Adopt Resolution 2023-066, approving an amendment to the 2040 Comprehensive Plan to re-guide 7.15 acres of land from the industrial to high-density residential, and authorize staff to submit the amendment to the Metropolitan Council.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Dennis, and second was Councilmember Thede?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Who would like to do number 2?
I will. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1064, approving a zoning amendment to change the zoning of the 7.15 acres from AG2 agricultural to R6 high-density residential, contingent on the Metropolitan Council's approval of the associated comprehensive plan amendment.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Kambata, seconded by Councilmember Dennis. Any discussion? Again, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And the final one?
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2023-067, approving the site plan review for a 299-unit, 5-story market rate multifamily apartment building on an approximate 7.15 acre parcel located on the southeast corner of 100th Street and Hadley Avenue.
All right, so I have a motion by Councilmember Thede. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Councilmember Kambata. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council and staff. And the final item in this category this evening is C, which is the low water zone treatment plant and Public Works Utility and Engineering Building. And Emily is going to walk us through this one too, so welcome back.
Mayor, Council, I am, however, this one is a 2-for-1, as I am going to tag team. I'm going to walk through the planning parts of this proposal, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Public Works Director Ryan Burfriend, who's going to talk a little bit more about the plans and specs and the bid date. So to start, from a planning perspective, the proposal is a 2-building site plan. So we reviewed the site as a whole on an approximate 20-acre parcel that, if you're not familiar, is located in the northeast corner of 110th Street and Ideal Avenue. As we looked at the site, they are proposing to access, and when I say they, of course, it's the city as their water treatment building and future utility and engineering building, proposing to access off of 110th Street to the south as well as Hadley Avenue to the west. This design does allow for future expansion areas as well, further to the east and a little bit to the north. This proposed project, or these proposed locations of these buildings on the site, do meet our minimum setback requirements, as well as the minimum required parking stalls. In this particular case, we're proposing 95 parking stalls. I wanted to make mention that there are lesser stalls proposed as a part of the water treatment building, and that is because that particular use or that particular building does not require as much staff or parking for that matter. So those parking stalls were planned and proposed further to the north as a part of the site. Our consultants certainly worked hard to be sure that the architecture proposed as a part of this project not only met the city's minimum standards, but did align and complement with other city buildings within the community. So precast panels, combining that with glazing, glass, brick, and stone was really a focus for these folks as they designed this building. So as you can see in my interpretation, these proposed buildings do meet those minimum standards. In addition, breaking up those long walls, those 100-foot spans, as you've heard me yammer on about before up here, breaking up those long and boring spans, I will say. They've also spent a lot of time putting together these beautiful renderings, so I felt it was very important to share these, specifically the water treatment plant. I don't know the details from an engineering perspective, so I'll let my friend Mr. Burfine speak more to that. But the way that this particular building, the interior mechanics of it have had to work, it really created an undulating building. And so as we look at this building, they really created a wonderful design, in my opinion. Same with the utility and engineering building, doing the same, making sure that these buildings continue to align with other city buildings within the community. And finally, I'll just touch briefly on the landscape. We are proposing to, of course, plant the minimum required landscaping as a part of this project. However, again, Public Works Director Burfine is going to give you some additional details specifically to the planning process and how they've designed and came up with the location of the landscape. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Public Works Director Ryan Burfine.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So just a couple more things on the landscaping to touch on. You see a lot of trees along that eastern property line. That's a current residential property, so we were trying to provide some screening. Those trees are actually kind of above and beyond the minimum landscape requirements. We did hear feedback at the neighborhood meeting that they almost felt a little boxed in. We did too good of a job screening that. So we are gonna work with them just to maybe thin that out a little bit. Like I said, those are above and beyond the landscape requirements, but if that resident is seeing this, we are gonna work with them to maybe thin that out. They want to be able to see and not kind of have a wall on their west property line. Also with the landscaping around the property, we have some small berms, just 3 feet high. You know, we're not trying to hide this building. I think we designed a pretty nice looking building. It's not a very intensive use, right? This isn't some trucking operation that we're trying to screen. The water treatment plant itself will have 1 pickup come and go a day. We'll only change out the treatment filters once every 4 to 5 years, and that semi will actually park inside the building. So, right, it's very minimal use. The utility building, you know, there's about 20 staff in there. And it's really a 7 to 4 Monday through Friday kind of operation, right? It's not some 24/7 logistical operation. So we want to be able to see in. We don't want to create large berms. We want to have visibility in for the public because this is a very important piece of infrastructure. We don't want folks to be able to get in there and feel like overnight they're kind of hidden from view and they can cause issues for our water system, right? We want people to be able to see it. And have visibility in. So that question came up at Planning Commission. Why aren't you building the huge berms that North Point is? And it's really not that intent, right? We're not trying to screen something in that manner. But you know, like I said, landscape plan does meet all the requirements, and I think that's important. And I will touch on the trees. The existing trees are a big point of discussion right now, and I'll touch on that in a future slide. Here's just another rendering showing the buildings layout, how they complement each other, and how that site will work. Kind of looking from looking easterly, you know, from across Ideal Avenue. In terms of the overall site, future expansion, just some things to note. Highlighted in blue is the city parcel. Highlighted in yellow is the parcel that is owned by North Point. This whole area is guided industrial. That's one of the main reasons this treatment plant and such is down there. It really fits into an industrial guidance in our comp plan. The trees that have been talked about, right? The trees were asked about at the neighborhood meeting. Are those remaining trees on the Ideal Avenue going to be cut down? At the time, you know, with the information we had, that was the indication that they would have to be cut down to install the deep sanitary sewer to serve this building. But in reality, as we really got through it, right, we were working all the way till last Thursday on the design. We feel pretty comfortable now that we can install that sanitary sewer and really save those trees that are still there north of 110th Street. There's 2 areas highlighted in yellow, those little yellow circles. That's where the driveways go through. We have to cut the trees down there because we have to get the driveways into the property. But we are going to do our best to save those remaining trees that are out there. I can't promise that every tree will be saved, right? If you get into the roots of a tree, you can't leave a dangerous tree that'll fall down later. But we're going to do our best to keep those utilities and all the work on the city property, not in the right of way where those trees actually sit. So that will be our goal to save those. There was some question on the species. They were talked about as a hawthorn tree. I had our forester go out there like twice. He's very confident they're a hackberry, but either way, a good tree is a good tree, right? It still has meaning, it still has benefit, and they look very nice. So whether it's a hawthorn tree, hackberry tree, we are gonna do our best to save those. Looking at the water treatment plant specifically, just because this question can come up, some folks from the public ask, is this like a sewer treatment plant? What are we doing here? This is a drinking water treatment plant, so we're gonna remove PFAS, fully funded by the 3M settlement. This is very exciting for the community. It's a $32 million project that we're estimated at. So it's a big project. Like I said, no city funding to build this water treatment plant. It uses the same methods we have right now. We have interim treatment in place in town with big carbon filters. It's like big Brita filters with some very, a lot more specialized carbon in them. That's that middle picture with those white vessels. That does really the work we're trying to do, remove all the PFAS from the drinking water. The lower one is a big green vessel. That actually is going to remove all iron and manganese. We have enough iron and manganese in our water that will create issues with those carbon filters and reduce the life. So we will get that iron and manganese removed. That's what everyone sees when we do flushing twice a year and your water turns brown. And on the top picture, that is just big pumps. We got to pump this water back out to our system, back up to the water towers. But all this is enclosed. Like I said, it's a very quiet operation. It'll sound just like being in this room when you're in that treatment room. Very quiet operation. And before your two recommendations tonight, one thing I want to be very specific on is the first one is a planning application. So that is strictly, the city is the applicant, but it is a planning application that's not approving the project from, moving ahead from a cost perspective or a plans perspective. It is a site, there's the two projects on the site. We want to be transparent. That does not specifically authorize to move forward on those projects. The real authorization tonight is for the low zone water treatment plant for plans and specs and setting a bid date. Very important to get that project moving. As we talked about the utility building about a month or so ago, that's on a different path. That would come back for plan approval and setting a bid date at a later time. So two different applications, or one application tonight and then a different motion to approve that low zone water treatment plant plans and specs.
Okay. Councilmember Thiede.
So speaking of that then, what's actually going to be in this first bid? How much, you're probably going to do some other grading and property prep?
Yep, so when you look at sites, Councilmember Thiede, you do want to do mass site grading to balance things out together. So there is some work for the overall property for the mass site grading, but none of the utilities, none of that other infrastructure for that utility building is part of this plan package. It's just mostly balancing out the site. If you move dirt twice, you spend twice the money.
Right.
So if we have to dig out a pond and make things balance, but that cost is about $200,000 to do some of that grading. But that's just setting up the site for the future. It would be very expensive and costly to not do that right now, even if it's not
Putting
used.
in both the retention ponds there that you see in the pictures and so forth?
That's correct, just digging them out.
Making it pad ready for the, okay.
Okay. Council, any other questions for staff? All right, I will ask just in case. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
I had to ask you a question. What's the timeline?
Councilmember Kabata.
That's a good question, Councilmember Kabata. So for the treatment plant, bidding it out this summer, start construction later this year, in September. Our real goal is to have it operational by June 1st of 2025. I know it sounds like a long time, but it's a very complex building, long lead times on things, so that's our main goal. We want to hit before that summer, and then we've got the second treatment plant that I'll be talking about later on this year into next year. 1 year behind and operational by 2026, because we have a very important deadline of December of 2026 to have all this in place with the new EPA rules.
All right, sounds good. Was there anybody in the audience who wanted to speak on this item by chance? All right, so council, there's two motions before us that are on the screen. Unless there's any questions, I'll look for somebody to make a motion.
Mayor, I'll move Resolution 2023-063, approving the site plan review for the low zone water treatment plant and Public Works Utility and Engineering Building to be located at the northeast corner of Ideal Avenue South and 110th Street South.
All right, so I have a motion by Councilmember Olson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Thiede. Any further discussion? Councilmember Dennis.
All right, Mayor, you had to know this was coming. I kind of feel like Custer's last stand here. I have not supported the Public Works Utility Building. I do support the low water zone treatment plant. I've been consistent all the way through. This is packaged in such a way that the two are locked together. So I just want to be very clear to the community that I support clean water and safe water for everybody, but I don't support the cost factor for the Utility Works building at this point. So I've been consistent all the way through. I'm not going to change it here at this last moment. So I can't authorize that because it's a nice plan. I know a lot of good work was put in on it, but I think there's other needs we have. It creates some efficiencies of moving vehicles and things like that, which I definitely understand. And I don't take this personal, and I don't want it personal to the staff, but I have my financial principles here, and I just can't authorize, that kind of spending when we've got a lot of other things that have to be paid off and want to protect that AAA rating. So that's just my position.
All right. Councilmember Olson.
Jennifer or Ryan, for you, was this site plan particularly, both the water treatment plant and the Public Works Utility and Engineering Building project, was that reviewed when we went out to bond last time by the bond house?
Mayor, members of the council, we did disclose to Standard & Poor's our future debt service, and that was included in it, sir.
Okay, so that was actually part of what they reviewed. I know we had just gone through that financial planning process. Okay, thank you.
All right. So we do have, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you, one more point, and thank you, Councilman Olson, for bringing that up. But, there's other cost factors to be concerned. One of the things is, if I recall, I believe we're having to raise our water costs to people to pay for this, correct? Okay, that is a correct answer on that. And then second, you always have operations and maintenance costs that are substantial, associated with a project like this. I will say our Public Works team has done a very good job all the way through. We commented on all the work that was done this winter with all the snowfall and things we had. These folks would make things work regardless of what building they were in because they care and they want to do a good job. Again, I'm looking at the totality of it, and again, better spent money for other things and opportunities that we could have. So.
And I guess I will just interject to say that I'm also still working on some additional state funding that, as Ryan and I have been up testifying at the Capitol, and we've had some, I don't know if it'll make it in this year's, but we'll see. But to help fund, and I think I actually shared that with you.
Get that money,
just so you know.
So
we're trying to get that money.
Now someone will be in my pocket if you get that money. So if we get that money to pay for it and alleviate the taxpayer, that's a great thing. So
that is the goal. Try to do that, because we're really doing this due to the fact of the increased size and the staff that we need for the water treatment facility. So that's really what the big thing is about. So, all right, so we have a motion and a second on number one. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? No. Motion carries 4-1. And then who would like to take number two?
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2023-074, approving the plans and specifications establishing a June 29, 2023 bid date for the low zone water treatment plant project.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Thiede. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Cavada. Any further discussion? Councilmember Dennis.
Because I do support clean, healthy, and safe water for people, I will vote yes on this.
There you go. All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ryan and Emily. Yes.
One note.
Councilmember Thiede.
To Councilman Dennis. So you don't approve a site plan for the low zone water treatment, but you approve going out for bid for it.
Yeah, I mean, I said Custer's last stand, right? So I think that anyone would have understood what I was saying by that.
All right. All right. Sounds good. So next, thank you both. Next is council comments and requests, and I will start with Councilmember Cavada.
I'll recuse my time.
Oh, okay, there you go. Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I'm looking forward to the trip that we're going to make out to Las Vegas on behalf of the city at the ICSC. We've worked hard to put together an itinerary for a number of individuals and companies and investors that we're going to seek to work with and bring some opportunity here to town. Again, things that people have been looking for long-term. It's kind of our target list. So I hope the community gets behind and wishes us well and that we can see some good things happen.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Councilmember Thede?
All right, there's only 4 weeks before Strawberry Fest. 4 weeks, yeah. That's almost a whole hand. It's less than a whole hand already. So definitely get excited. Also, if if you have any groups that want to be in the parade, things like that, it seems like this is coming up quick all of a sudden. But you need to get your registrations in, things like that, to be in the parade. And there's also the there's the 5K and the walk and the softball tournament and all these other events. So you can find out all of that at cottagegrovestrawberryfest.com and see what all those are. And there's all the registrations, the forms, everything else, everything you need right there on that website. So get excited. We got some great bands and everything. It's going to be, I heard there's going to be great weather. Just a little bird said that, but so we'll see. If it's not correct, then it's a little bird's fault. But so get excited and let's have a great time again.
Fantastic, thank you. Councilmember Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let the public know about the Memorial Day event that will be held right here at City Hall on May the 29th at 10 a.m. So this is a change from our previous time. We have had the Memorial Day event historically at 1 p.m. This year, we will have that event at 10 a.m. here at City Hall at the Veterans Memorial, which is just to my left if you were to be able to walk through this wall. We have a very, very exciting speaker this year. He happens to be one of our own. Cottage Grove Fire Department Captain Nick Aragoni will be our speaker. And Nick serves in the military as a staff sergeant currently. He's part of the Minnesota National Guard Charlie Company. He's in the 2211 Battalion. And essentially what they do is they are airborne medics. So Nick is a medic. He's one of those folks who, they drop into the war zone and they provide medical services to any injured troops, and if necessary, then provide a ride to a medical facility should that be necessary. Nick has been in his role for about 12 years, so he's certainly not new, and he's actually been deployed one time. He was deployed in 2018 for a year deployment where he served in Kuwait and Iraq and Jordan and Syria. So we're really looking forward to having Nick speak at the event. We have several other things that will be part of the event. This year, we unfortunately don't have my colleague, Councilmember Dennis, as our coordinator. He has put tons of time, energy, and effort into that event for the last several years. I think it's 6 or more. It was time for somebody else to step up. So the city staff, in conjunction with our Beyond the Yellow Ribbon team, hence my Beyond the Yellow Ribbon shirt tonight, will be coordinating this event for the foreseeable future. And again, we're really looking forward to having the public come out. It's very important, especially as I sit here and I talk about the fact that it is National Military Appreciation Month, that we remember the fallen. And Memorial Day is a very somber day. It's a time for us to reflect on the people who gave all to protect us and our freedoms. So I hope that we will see you here at City Hall, and you'll have an opportunity to listen to some very good stories from Staff Sergeant Nick Aragoni. And secondly, Mayor, I just wanted to give a shout out to our friends at River Oaks. I've told some of you, we had our Cottage Grove Lions Awards Dinner, which is an annual event out at River Oaks last night. And it's the first time we've done it at River Oaks. The event gets bigger and bigger every year, so we needed a little more space. And of course, the team at River Oaks did just a marvelous job. They were unbelievable. The food was great. The service was great. They worked with us very closely on logistics and really made for a fun evening. So my compliments to Dennis and the staff down there. Courtney really worked hard for us too. So Zach, if you could just pass that along, I'd sure appreciate it. Back to you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So a couple items just for the public. I think at our last council meeting, I had the opportunity to share with the public that my wife and I attended a play at Park High School, which was amazing, and so Mamma Mia. But I also wanted to mention, as you think about different talents in our community, on May 20th here, coming up in the next few days, is the ice show at the Cottage Grove Ice Arena. And it's called America's Songbook on Ice. And if you want tickets to that, you can. They are available online through the Parks and Rec Department or the city's website. And so I encourage you, if you get an opportunity, and I don't know how hot the weather is going to be on the next few days here, but if you want to go cool down a little bit, you can go watch a great show and see some of the youth in our community, and adults for that matter, put on a really good show. And then I will mention, it was kind of interesting, and I'll kind of toss this a little bit at staff. My wife went online and ordered her St. Paul Saints tickets, and she actually said there was hardly any tickets left. So I know that I believe our city has a section, and they were saying there's not many tickets left in that section. So I think that's a great thing, because that just means our community is really going to get out there and have some fun. So I encourage anybody, if you want to come join us and celebrate the city of Cottage Grove, that is on Community Night at the Saints game. That's June 10th. And it's perfect because that's the kickoff, kind of the lead-in to all of the events for Strawberry Fest. So it's really going to be kind of a neat week, if you will, going in there. You can start to celebrate by taking in America's Pastime Baseball, celebrate the city of Cottage Grove, and then head right into Strawberry Fest and all the festivities.
You could wear your strawberry costumes.
Okay.
Did your birdie say we're going to have good weather for the baseball game too?
Well, it was for strawberries.
I see.
So
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it included.
He's not extending it.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to know who to blame if it's not.
All right, sounds good. So any other council comments or requests? So for the general public, the next on our agenda is a workshop open to the public. We do not have one this evening. However, we do have a workshop closed to the public. And this is a closed meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, subsection 3A, I have to say it this way, to conduct a performance evaluation of a city administrator, Jennifer Levitt. And then we will be adjourning from there. So everybody have a great evening and a great Memorial Day coming up here, and hopefully we'll see you at the ceremony.